So the,
Council Lenahan?
yes,
Here. Council Crowe?
Here.
Council O'Malley?
Here.
Council Taylor?
Here.
Chair Winslow?
here, all right, so the Rules and Ordinance Committee is what?
Under the provisions of open meeting law, for those of you in attendance, please be informed this meeting is being streamed live on Microsoft Teams. There will be an audio and video recording of this meeting. For those watching at home, you may enable live captions and do so in your desired language. For assistance on choosing language options, use the link on the bottom of the agenda or visit cityofmalden.org/captions for further instructions. It should be expected that live captions translations are not perfect, but as the technology continues to improve, so will the delivery of this important feature.
All right,
Was that
so,
well said?
so we have a tabled paper, so I need a motion to untable the paper from last week. So Councilor Linehan, motion to untable the paper 1325, seconded by Councilor O'Malley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that table is now, that paper is now taken off the table. Clerk, can you just read it?
Paper 13-25, be it ordained by the Malden City Council that the Code of the City of Malden, Title 12 zoning, is hereby amended to establish requirements and regulations for accessory dwelling units, including definitions in the establishment of a site plan review committee for accessory dwelling units by amending chapters and sections 12.030, 16.010, 20.010, 32.060, and by adding new subsections 12.28.010K, 32.030D, and 32.030E.
Okay, so if you recall last week's meeting, primarily we had Ms. Ramiro go through the draft paper and memo. So I am actually, because I want to speak to that, and I had my proposal that had come to committee, I would like to hand over the chair to Councilor Linehan, so I could speak to what I had done. So,
Okay, happy to do that. Councilor Winslow, I will recognize you and present your changes.
So if you, what hands out, I basically took some notes, so you'll see there's 5 pages with some red line strikeout on it. So I'll just kind of go over that. So one of the things is just reading the proposal that came down from the mayor's office was, I was concerned that it was very going to be very difficult for a lot of people to do ADUs. I think that was something I thought that my concern is that you're having to deal with some of the Doberman and stuff in another context, that we can be challenged. The legislature passed a law that says we should be allowing this, but we can set reasonable regulations. I was concerned that maybe if we as a council went forward with the paper as recommended, there'd be some questions about what might be reasonable or not. So I'll give you my little perspective on what I thought was reasonable, and then I'll explain why I suggest these changes. And I put them in for discussion purposes. We know there's a tight time frame, and I just thought it needed to go forward. So one of the things is, I've been in a home, lived in Malden since 1989, a homeowner since 1991. I have seen changes in my own neighborhood and across the city. Back and I have, through my work as a counselor and just as a resident, hearing about people. In my own neighborhood, I've seen some, Maplewood is not Manchester. We were not the West End. We have a lot of small starter homes on lots that were laid out. Ours was back in the 1870s. These were modest homes that have been added to over the years, including in my life, here in Malden. And what I saw is that there are some major additions in my neighborhood that, if ADUs were allowed, they might have well end up being ADUs. These were additions being driven by homeowners working to take care of kids, take care of an elderly parent, and other type of things. My own home has an addition that was really built as an in-law room with an adjoining bath to take care of an elderly parent. So I see that additions have been done that could have very well been, but for our regulations could have been done in a different way. And I think, that's one of the things that I've observed. And what I've seen in my neighborhood is that additions that, so related to section 1, where I made some notes about, actually section 2, I'll talk about section 2 a little bit about, related to intensive uses of, in terms of dimensional controls, what I saw in my own neighborhood that when people, some people had to go to the zoning board of appeals simply to extend their house back 15 feet to add that room for their father. And simply because over the years, the 1878 foot setback is now 10 feet. So they had to go to the zoning board of appeals. So neighbors didn't really object to that. It was very straightforward. But what I saw was someone came in, bought one of these modest homes, wanted to tear it down, and build a huge 3-story monstrosity. People didn't like that. So I think that some of it is, I do think that looking at existing setbacks from homes that are older is appropriate. I mean, I think the other thing is that, back when lots were being laid out in Malden, frontage was typically 50 feet, and the lots were maybe 100 foot deep. So our lots are in the neighborhood of 5,000 square feet. So if you have 7,500 being the basis, which was really just adopted more recently, it excludes a lot of potential areas in the city. So I think that's the type of thing. I just don't think it's reasonable. And, a proposal, I mean, I see, like I say, I've seen people move out of my neighborhood because they could not put a unit that could allow them to have their mother or an in-law live. And, it is, as you get older, it's nice to live, and being, some of us are taking care of older parents or family members. You want to be close to people, but you don't necessarily want to have them in the same house. So that's the type of thing that by allowing people, and I guess I trust what I've seen the homeowners in my neighborhood do. And so that's the type of thing. So in terms of section 12.16.01, which is table of intensive use, my suggestion is that we allow them at 5,000 square feet, not 7,500, because I think that's more consistent. And I did do some research. Most of the houses in Malden were built well before 1999, 86%, and 68% were built before 1970. So that 7,500 square foot is a more recent thing to really discourage development. And then I say these setbacks are not consistent with the historical setbacks in a neighborhood like mine. So I think that we should give flexibility that if someone's not making the setbacks, that are not encroaching closer to their neighbors, that's something that should be allowed. So, and then in terms of height, the same way, if you're not making, if you're just doing an addition straight back, the size of your existing building, you wouldn't have to go to site plan review. You could get those to happen. So that's really the spirit of what I put in there is to, so that's really the type of thing. I mean, we are, Malden, our affordable housing track, we were trying to maintain and create opportunities for affordable housing. So Malden remains a vibrant, diverse, and inclusive community where residents and families can stay and thrive. So I think the other thing is that I've observed over the course of time is that people who getting older, they're looking for opportunities or ways to stay in Malden, even in their neighborhood or nearby. We don't have a lot of options for someone who it's getting difficult to maintain a house. So that the fact that it's great we have 2 and 3 family homes, I think that's a great thing. Growing up in a community that you could only have single family homes, it was really something nice that I see in New England is something that makes Malden great. And I think that I'd like to see more of that. So I think it is the type of thing that if there could be some room, that should be something we would be reasonably done. So that I say, just wanted to put out something as an alternative to create some opportunities here. I mean, I think the other thing is that in terms of one of the things I thought we should probably stick to is the minimally usable open space. Preference not to see like someone's whole backyard become a whole new unit. that we should encourage people to do additions, not, other big monstrosities. So I think that's something I'm supportive of. So, and then, so those are just things I think, so just going through, so in terms of site plan review, I think that subjecting every possible of one of these proposals through site plan review is very burdensome. You can see how lengthy that process is. And that, I just think that it's a burden. So I think we should try to look at some things, but I definitely think that not allowing any variation from pretty strict things is too strict. So, and then, like I say, I really like to maintain open space. And so we have limits that protect that, in terms of light and air and preserving trees and heat island effects. It's good to try to preserve open space. So that's one of the things. So that's the type of thing. In terms of, I know in my notes, I said we should just eliminate the parking requirements across the city. That was really driven more by my understanding of what the draft state regulations are. I actually think that if we had a choice as a city, that I'm not supportive of the half mile from a bus route. I think that in particular, like in our Highlands areas, that the topography makes it hard to make the choice to walk to a bus and stuff like that. So my own thing, I actually put in comments to the state on their draft regulations to say I would prefer to not have bus routes be the decision from a half mile, but I think as a community we should say 500 or 1,000 feet from a bus route, which is more reasonable. And if you look at the patterns of development, those are the denser areas that tend to be. So if there's some potential to add some ADUs in the very walkable areas there, where we had trolley lines going back to 150 years, we should be open to that. So that's the type of thing. But, I think that I'm open to having something different if the state allows us something different. But I do think that within short walking distance to bus routes, we should not require parking. Though if it's further away in the islands, I think we should look at requiring parking. And those tend to be less dense areas anyway. So there will be some ability to have some parking there. And I say like the requirements of site plans are very detailed. So I think it's something that we should have less burdensome. And finally, one comment I have, it's not actually in here, but it's something we need to discuss as a council, is the suggestion right now is that, we create some separate site plan review committee that will review, I guess, maybe all these. It wasn't clear. We have to clarify that, but that would be led by a counselor. And one of my understandings is from dealing with this Dover Amendment stuff is that generally the courts have frowned on situations there where there might be site plan review, but that should not be a politically driven process. So there's some risk that if we put a counselor on the site plan review committee, that may be struck down in and of itself, and it puts a lot of burden. And I think one of the questions I have for the administration is, however we do it, site plan review is going to be a burden on the staff. And one of the things I said, there's going to be, I actually did just get my former boss, is the community development director in Salem. I asked them, they have, he sent me just today, I'll give an update on this.
Excuse me, with all due respect, we have people here, we want to be able to
Okay,
debate.
all right, I'm just laying out what we are going to do.
Hold on.
Okay.
We spoke for 45 minutes on the initial
Okay.
proposal.
Okay.
I want to give council.
I just want to say, so there was, someone asked about what was going on in Salem, so I actually reached out. So they've had an ADU ordinance since April 2021 in Salem. They've had 32 applications, 18 of which are active building permits. So that's what they've had in.
Are they owner occupied, Steve?
So
Council Winslow, tell the rules though.
I'm just saying.
You're not telling the rules though, because I know what that.
I'm just giving an example. We know that the Salem ADU, as was
It's owner
discussed,
occupied.
it had to be, it had to be affordable. There was more limits. Greg, you were right. I'm just saying that.
Well, you're telling half the story.
So I'm just saying it was an example.
Please
I got
stop talking over everybody. We know this is a tense issue.
I've got anything like it.
So that is,
Call the
all
meeting.
right. I just wanted to have that opportunity to have discussion that there is some reason that I see in my own neighborhood that having some more flexibility and some open to this could be beneficial, because I see, so that's just, I want to have that discussion. I feel that the standards that got set down by the administration are just very strict and unnecessarily strict. So that's
So,
what I.
Thank you for the
That's, I
overview.
leave that, so.
In terms of process, I think I would like to take questions on Counselor Winslow's proposed changes. And then my understanding is that we need to actually vote on if we're going to make recommended amendments to bring to the planning board on next Monday, correct? So that's just the order of operations here. And my recollection from the last meeting that Counselor Winslow was running is that we were expecting to have a comparison in terms of data tonight of the 7,500 versus the 5,000 and how many properties that would impact.
Okay, so we have.
So maybe, Michelle, can I turn it over to you briefly before we have questions from the rest of the committee? Did you have a chance to bring those numbers related to the two different square lot sizes?
Thank you. One thing I did want to mention, I do have some information I can share, is that, and I didn't mention this last time, the reason those 5 districts were chosen is because of how the state is defining single-family zoning district. Those 5, residence A, B, C, residential office and neighborhood business, are the only districts where single families are allowed. And I don't think I said that last time, but I wanted that to be clear.
Yep.
That's why. So there had been a request for a map showing.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second? Did you say there are no single-family homes in existence, or they're not allowed?
No, not allowed.
Not allowed.
So this is, the state defines single-family zoning district, and again, these are the draft guidelines, so that could change. But as of right now, it defines it to be where a single-family dwelling is allowed,
Okay,
not where it exists, because of course there are some
sure.
here and there in industrial zones. So I know we were asked previously which districts, so we do have a zoning map, and I don't have enough copies. I have a rough draft just showing you which districts that means, okay?
Okay.
So, this is just to give you a sense. So this is the official zoning map. So it's showing you all the districts. Anywhere there's a crosshatch of those 3 districts where it's not allowed: central business, highway business, and industrial 1 and 2. So as you can see, it's the majority of the city. So the majority of the city would be subject to this regulation. Whichever set of controls gets put in. We don't have exact numbers at this point. What I do have is some basic estimates that was just pulled from the assessor's data, which I, need to put the caveat in right off the bat that is not necessarily supported by use and occupancy records of the building department. So this is just what the properties are being assessed as. Okay, and again, since it's the majority of the city, it's not broken down into districts. The neighborhood business zoning district's very small, C is very small, B is very small, majority is A. So again, this is just very, very gross, again, estimates. There are approximately 6,000 single families in the city. Okay, so that's citywide.
Did you have a question on that,
Right.
Councilor O'Malley?
Because I think that we were trying to figure out how many parcels are 5,000 square feet or less, between 5,000 and 7,500, and above 7,500.
Correct.
Do we have?
Not at this time. I understood we were trying to still determine potential properties this could apply to. So I thought if we started with single, and have a breakdown for 2s, 3s, and then mixed use. So you can see.
I would still love that data,
Yeah,
but I do think that what we really need is that delta of how many people we affected.
I think
It's a combination of records that need to be meshed between
Okay.
the assessor's database and our GIS system. So it's not the easiest thing in the world to come up with. It just pick these criteria and say, well, we have 6,491. So
Yeah.
it's being worked on, but it's going to take some time to narrow down exactly how many 5,000 square foot lots, because they're not always that neat and clean either, right? Sometimes it's 5,204. So the way Nate and Steve Farmer have to manipulate their combined software takes a little bit of effort.
And the other thing, yeah, thank you for that. The other thing I just want to add is, I know we're fixating on this number, and I heard Council Winslow say the part about the variance. The variance means we can't, send anybody for a variance. No variance is required. You wouldn't seek a variance. Once these regs are in, they're in. You're not going to be going to Board of Appeal varying them. That was the point of that provision. There shall be no variance. The Site Plan Review Committee, their job, if you will, is going to be to review these petitions and determine whether the regulations are reasonable applied to that particular case. So on a case-by-case basis, they're going to look at lot size, they're going to look at setbacks, they're going to look at open space, and determine, are those regulations reasonable to be applied? That's how the Dover Amendment site plan review is supposed to work. That's our understanding of it. That's why in that section called criteria, it says the committee will determine whether they'll apply these regs. So there may be a house on your Holyoke Street that doesn't have any setbacks. So the committee could potentially say, there are no setbacks. It's not reasonable to impose setbacks because there are none. They could look at a larger house lot that has wide, ample setbacks, and the person proposes to violate them, and they may say, that's not reasonable. It's reasonable that you comply with the setbacks because you have room to do it. Same thing with height, same thing with open space. So that's how it's going to work. Whether the number 7,500 is the minimum. So if you want to walk in and build a new house on a new single family, that's the minimum. So that's what the state suggested we use that. That's why we recommend that. If it's 5,000, if it's 7,500, I think Counselor said you won't be able to apply. Anybody can apply if you're in one of these districts and you have an existing dwelling. Those are the only two criteria that we can require.
Yeah. Point of clarity, when you say the state recommends the 7,500, it's because they're recommending we align with our existing
Single family. Yes, correct. Okay. Right. They're not recommending 700. They're saying hold this new unit to the same criteria you would for a single. So if you would require this for a new single or an addition, as the council mentioned, you should hold these to the same standard. So that's what we're following along. Then like I said, I do have the 1 second. Basic numbers.
Are you okay,
Yes.
Councilor O'Malley? Okay,
No, go ahead, Councilman Malley. He might have the same question I did.
Well, so I'm hearing that the site, and we were trying to make this earlier. It sounds like site plan review cannot prohibit, cannot reject it. It has to end to a yes. The problem is how long can that process last? Like Rose Quarry has lasted years. So what I'm trying to avoid is putting our residents through a administrative purgatory. But it sounds like they won't get caught up in that for pre-existing dwellings. But if it's new construction, they'd have to comply with these regulations.
No, the criteria for any site plan review is going to be what is specified here and what's recommended. And again, this was taken out of it. This was recommended in terms of the Dover standard. So the scope of site plan review, what reasonable regulations concerning bulk and height, yard sizes, lot area, setbacks, open space, building coverage, if any, should be imposed on the use. So that's why I will just strongly recommend it. It's going to be very important that we're consistent. One house on one street shouldn't be treated any differently from the house next door. One is going to go for site plan review, one is not going to go for site plan review. The site plan review is supposed to look at the proposal on a case-by-case basis, specifics of that particular case. And there's a time frame in here. It can't go on forever. There's a constructive approval provision in here if a decision is rendered. So, I mean, I'm not sure when you say who mentioned row 4.
Which number?
That's under procedural. So you have the public hearing, the decision, the denial shall.
Sorry, what's the number?
This is 10 on page 415, section 10. Conditions are denied. Denial shall be predicated only upon applicants fail to provide necessary information. So they don't provide the floor plans, they don't provide the site plan, they don't provide what they need to provide so that the site plan review can make a decision. They can't, grant it without the required information. In making the decision, it's guided exclusively by the state law. They file the written decision within 90 days. Failure to file the decision constitutes approval of the plan.
But this says close of the public hearing. The public hearing's never closed.
I mean, the public hearing can only remain open if there's a reason for it to remain open. If there's more information coming in or more testimony coming in, typically they don't remain open.
So should we have the 90-day apply to the hearing? The hearing cannot be held open longer than 90 days.
I wouldn't say that because there could be an example where somebody's ill or, there's an issue that needs to be resolved. They want to redesign the project. The architect passes away. Who knows? I don't think we should. I think we should leave it. This is how, I would recommend you leave it. If you don't want to do 90 days, if you want to move it up, that would be another option, abbreviate the time. Maybe it's not 90 days. But keep in mind, you're going to have to move pretty quickly. There has to be, notice to abutters and. So, I think 65 would probably be the bare minimum we want to do, but.
Because the hearing, the point of the hearing is to get public testimony. But debating, coming up with a decision from, like the site plan review will have a public hearing here from the neighbors. You don't need that to be open for 90 days. That usually happens in one night. And then you have the meeting after to decide what your decision is. So I feel like if we can't allow it to be having the public hearing open forever, the public hearing should close. And
Okay, that's a procedural thing. I don't have any, that's, you could consider the 90-day a placeholder. It's not, the hearing is to comply with section 11, which is part of 48. In terms of the notice and the time plan and whatnot, so.
Are you good, Councilor O'Malley?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take Councilor Stack for
Just so I understand this, I think in the rec was 1,000 square feet of open space, right? Under the requirement, right?
for single family.
Yeah. So so if you have 1,000 square feet and you want to build a detached ADU, and that would prevent me from having 1,000 square feet of open space, what happens? You need a variance?
The existing dwelling will no longer have the open space?
Well, let's just say there's not open space. Let's say you're going under 1,000. Because Council Winslow says he doesn't care about parking. He cares about open space. So I don't care about anything then. Let's let him pave the entire lot because you can't pick and choose which one we're going to give a variance to. So my question is, if it's going to be in the 1,000 space, and on a side note, I do care about the open space. My point is, if it's under 1,000 square feet, by me building a detached ADU, can I get a variance?
We've received an opinion, this is one opinion, and it's very important to realize that none of this is final.
Yeah, it's going to change.
With the
We all
state,
know that.
right? And none of it's gone through, none of it's been litigated, so let's just take it for what it is. We have one opinion that says if you create a violation for a detached ADU, if you create a violation of the principal dwelling, which is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You could send the principal dwelling for a variance because you're not denying the ADU. The variance is for the principal dwelling.
So they need setbacks too.
No, you're not moving the principal dwelling. So the setbacks.
But if the detached ADU is within 10 feet of
But that's a different area. So
Okay.
just you're talking open space.
Well, I'm just trying to put my head like.
There's an opinion that if you're gonna take away required open space,
Yeah.
create a violation of open space.
Yeah.
That would require a variance of the principal dwelling prior to going through a site plan review process for the detached
Okay.
ADU. There's also an opinion that a existing detached structure, let's say a garage, if it's already in violation of setbacks, required setbacks or height or anything else, prior to going to a site plan review process, it could be required to go get a variance because you're converting it from a garage to a dwelling. So you're not sending an ADU for a variance, you're sending a garage for a variance. And then if you're successful with that, then you can go with site plan review.
Yeah, and I think
This is a single,
Yes.
a legal.
They're not building a garage.
So, I just want to say this, everybody knows how I feel about this, right? We have to do it, right? So at the end of the day, I don't think, this is my opinion, is the way Salem did it, owner occupied, affordability, I don't have a challenge with it, right? Because that's the intent. It's a smokescreen by the state, because there is no affordability clause. And if anybody in this room tells me that the majority of the people are going to be owner occupied and it's going to be a relative and a neighbor, you're lying to yourself. Because we know what's going to happen in this community is people will take advantage of the rules because we live in Malden and not Winchester. Because what they'll do is, because they're not near a train station, they're going to have a parking requirement. So the cities around Boston will take it on the chin. And I know you probably said, we're all in it together. We're not all in it together. Because all the rich communities will stay rich and they'll have their green space. This will ruin the city, not now, to death by 1,000 cuts. And then in 5 years from now, when the schools are filled and there's density issues, and then we're going to have the gall to talk about environmental concerns, we're kidding ourselves. I wish we could have owner occupied. I wish we had site plan review. And I also wish you could have affordability component because you'd have some controls. This is not good for the city of Malden. And the other thing, as councilors, the idea that the state comes in and changes the law, again, it's not uniform, is a problem. I have it. And just like the MBTA, you see what the rich community's done. Wellesley, Needham, we're not doing it. Take away our grants. So the state, so it's going to be back to Malden, Chelsea, Everett, Medford are all going to suffer. And some of our elected officials, we know where they live, their communities will not be harmed. They will not be harmed. So my challenge with this is we have to do it. I have no problem going with the city's recommendations because I think the state will come in and change them eventually because somebody's going to sue. I just don't know what the challenge is, us being a little bit more resourceful. Just like the MBTA, whoever made that recommendation, doesn't go into effect till the state does it. It was a beautiful move, right? But I think we got to be adults here. The idea that nobody's going to have a car, go to Ward 2. Come by my house at Ward 3. Everybody drives there. And you can't get out of parking lots. Ask Ron. I had a call the other day because people parked their car in front of my quadriplegic neighbor's backyard. There's nobody walking. There's nobody taking bikes. It's not because they don't want to do it. Nobody trusts their kids to walk to school anymore because they think it's unsafe. It's an unfortunate circumstance. But this idea that nobody has kids, nobody's going to have school, everybody's going to rent to somebody affordable, they will take advantage of the situation 8 out of 10 times. And I'm just letting everybody know right now, this will be the death of the inner city schools. Thank you.
Can I actually just ask, I want to ask just one clarifying question on what Councilor Spatafora asked for Nelson. What, if you're the primary dwelling and you need that variance, what are you bringing? Like, if you have a single family home and you want to convert a garage to the ADU, I hear what you're saying, you're not going for a variance for the ADU, you're going for the garage. But if it throws the single family out of the open space requirement, like Councilor Spatafora was saying, and you're saying that you have to then get a variance for the single family home, what are you bringing in if you don't intend to change the single family home? Are you bringing the plans for the ADU conversion?
You'd be bringing in a plan, most likely a site plan, that shows what changes you're making that are increasing your nonconformity.
Okay.
So if you have the only way you could increase your nonconformity with an accessory structure is to change the structure.
Right.
If it's an existing garage, you're not creating a new nonconformity. So let's say you have a garage, but you got to make it bigger because most garages aren't big enough to live. Right. You're going to make it bigger, and now you throw your principal structure into a non-compliance issue with open space. You're bringing us a plan that says, "Look, I'm making my garage bigger." And you say, "Okay, well, you need a variance for the house because you're no longer compliant with the open space." You get your variance. Now you have the ability to build that structure. Turn to an ADU. And like I said, there's an opinion. I'm not saying this is how the city of Malden is going to do this. We need to get some heavy-duty legal advice on this. But there is an opinion that says you could send that accessory structure then for a variance to turn it to a dwelling from a garage, and then go through the site plan review process if that's what you all decide to get the ADU.
So Councilor Crowe is on committee, so I'm going to take you, and then I'll go back to Councilor Simonelli and Councilor McDonald.
Just to Nelson's point, so if I have to go to the Board of Appeals to get a variance for the main structure, what if they deny my variance?
Then you don't get an ADU.
That's straightforward.
I think this is why it's hard not knowing how many pre-existing non-conformities we have, because that feels like everyone, basically. I worry that we're gonna have legal action. I'm not disagreeing or agreeing with, I think there's a lot of benefits and drawbacks to this, and there's a lot of different ways we could handle it, but I'm trying to think about, like, the state intent is clearly to set a path and let us put reasonable restrictions on it and make it predictable for people. And I think that behooves us because it prevents us from people suing us, which we don't want to have happen.
I can tell you that there's no way we can produce a list of how many properties in the city of Malden comply with their open space law.
I was gonna add that the lot area alone is just lot area. Setbacks, open space,
It's a lot late.
building coverage, there's no.
Which goes back to the reason for a site plan review process, because
Well, that's
not
what
every 5,000 square foot lot is, you know, constructed equally. So it gives the ability for the city and the neighbors to look at a lot and
Right.
say, they have lots of open space on 5,000, they have little or whatever, you know, it's a broad brush. You're trying to-
First why?
Yeah,
That's why it's each separate one, like you were saying, for each.
Right. Well, and it makes me, my initial reaction was the site plan review felt too onerous, but I'm actually feeling, particularly for detached, how else are you gonna blend together all of these different dimensional controls? I will say that makes me feel like maybe the square footage, the lot sizes, we maybe should consider not having it at all, because it feels like any number is gonna be arbitrary, and if everyone has to go to site plan review, we can touch on all these other impact issues in another way. This is hard, Councilor Malley.
What I really don't understand is, so, because we're putting in dimensional controls that are mimicking to some degree the single family zone. If we didn't have site plan review and they didn't comply with those dimensional controls, how would they get relief?
from me,
You would make the call.
that's what the Board of Appeals just said. last month.
Good.
Because,
So then, you know,
so you can grant.
So you're gonna recommend to get that decision right or
no, I
wrong?
have no idea. I sit in my office and pick winners and losers.
Because this says there's no variance, you can't get variances. This says you can't get variance, you can't go to the Board of Appeal.
For an ADU.
Okay. Well, I think that's the other thing.
But it goes back to the open space though. It's not the ADU you get the variances because you're encroaching on the.
Well, that's the other question. So this is saying we require 1,000 square feet of open space for the ADU. Does that mean if you have a single family home, you have to have 1,000 square feet for the single family home and 1,000 square feet for the ADU? So you actually have to
No,
have
it's
2,000
not.
square.
It's all wrong.
Totality,
For the parcel.
right,
Yeah.
so that changes things
It's not
dramatically
2,000, it's the
for
1,000.
my neighborhood.
The open space thing is not a structure thing, it's a parcel.
So Councilor Simonelli has been waiting. I know you're on committee, and I want to get to the folks off committee that have been waiting. Councilor Simonelli, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listen, honestly, I'll be honest with you, I don't even know why I'm not on this committee, because I actually live in the most densely populated neighborhood in this community. And this is single-handedly gonna mess up my neighborhood along with Council Crowe. She got, after this new districting, she got a good portion of my neighborhood on that side. You know, Steve, I like the fact that, you know, you've been here since, I don't know, 85, 88, whatever you said, but, you know, I've been here since 1968. That's Suffolk Square. Those houses that go on Suffolk Square, it's Ward 7. And my family been here for 100 years prior. And I'm not one for not developing. You all know me. I'm doing development right now. But I'm telling you right now, I want to be on record that this is going to single-handedly destroy my neighborhood. And I know it's not any of the council's faults here because we're being mandated to do this. But I want you to take this in consideration when this thing does come into effect and we do make the changes that we need to make for the city to have some sort of muscle to be able to protect these neighborhoods. You know, I'll tell you right now, I have 2 housing projects. I have 2 senior buildings. You know, Steve, you mentioned about, you know, where our seniors gonna go. We're like the top 5 largest housing authority in the Commonwealth. We've got plenty of places for our seniors to go. I've never had a problem placing a senior. So, I mean, I don't think we have to add. But hold on, I'm here now. Let's talk about professionalism, right? I didn't mention that earlier?
Yes,
Yeah, so stick to it.
absolutely.
All
We
right.
have a
So,
reference there.
now, I also have scattered housing all over throughout my neighborhood. Now, when I was around, there was this thing called urban renewal. And so what a transition that's happened here is because when I was on the council, we also had a task force. When I was the director of inspection services, we were going after people that were building apartments in units illegally and putting things. I know this makes it legal, but not really. It's just because the state says it's legal, but it's not. So the fact is, right now, I got Everett right next door to me that has parking by permit only, the entire city. The entire city. I think we should do it here, because right now, Bridge Street, Taylor Street, from Ridge Street all the way to Cross, my neighborhood is being seriously impacted. It affects street sweeping, so my neighborhood looks filthy, not clean. I get no plowing in my neighborhood. And it's not the DPW director or his team's fault. They do the best they can. But if you've got all these cars all over the place that don't belong there, and then now you're gonna add to these units and bring even more cars, and everyone drives. Everyone drives. They're getting rid of the T-lines in my neighborhood because not enough people are using them. Because they all got cars. Just because my neighborhood's a low-income neighborhood doesn't mean they don't drive cars. So that's ridiculous. And I'm telling you, urban renewal during the 60s, they changed it to break the 6, 8 families down to make them single families so we wouldn't be so densely impacted. Now here we are, what, 40 years later, 50 years later, doing the total opposite. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. None. So I just want to be on record for my constituency in Ward 7 that I'm not for this at all. And, you know, I think you're going to have a lot of fight or flight in the city. I think you're going to see a lot of people taking off. And you know what? What it gets replaced with, beyond me. So good luck.
Absentee landlords.
Well, that's another thing, absentee landlords. I got them all down in the Holyoke section of my neighborhood right now. I talked to Chuck, and we'll talk to legal about it, put a plan together. I think there should be a separate tax on absentee landlords, because do you know how many times I have to send people down to clean up these people's houses? There have been homeowners that own 6-family houses in the Holyoke section of my neighborhood that hasn't seen their houses in over 10 years. They get the checks mailed to them. They don't know if there's 10 families living on the first floor or 20 families living on the first floor.
They don't care.
And they don't care. So if anything, if we're gonna put this into effect, as long as it's legal, we should put a separate tax on these absentee landlords. Listen, it's income property.
I agree.
They're making money off it, whether it's equity or whether it's cash. They're making a killing. And now we're gonna allow them to build another unit. So I got a 6-family unit in my district of Holyoke Street, right? I got an absentee landlord that lives in Winchester, right? He's gonna be able to put another unit on there if he falls within the 1,000 square feet that he needs for the open space. That's ridiculous.
But for the record, it's because we had increased costs that we need to recoup.
What?
We would tax
It's
landlords.
because of increased costs.
It would be to cover the cost of inspection.
What I'm saying is, I still have the floor, folks.
I'm not joking.
I don't understand.
You're absolutely right, Councilman O'Malley.
What I'm saying is that if this tax that we put on could help out the director of inspectional services and the board of health. So when I make a call and say, which I have been, all right, so as the mayor, you've been dealing with some of my constituents down in Holyoke, correct? What's going on down there? They're doing illegal building. They're not keeping up with their properties. They got overgrowth of vegetation all over the place. And it's not a butterfly garden, guys. It's overgrown vegetation. So the fact of the matter is that the director of inspectional service and the board of health director should have the power and authority to be able to have an account that they can go to, that have somebody go down there and cut. Then we put a lien on their property like we used to with the housing task force, and put a lien on their property until they fix it right and pay us back. I'm all done.
You should have ended with the butterfly.
I know, I like that.
Councilor McDonald, Councilor Taylor, and Councilor Clone.
We vote on anything
Speak
tonight.
as well? Okay, Councilor McDonald.
I can make a recommendation.
What do you do tonight?
I don't know.
Okay, gosh. So many things have transpired here today. So what I want to say is I really do think that it is important for us to figure out how to help people build more housing the way we want them to do that. And what I see over and over is this council saying, well, we don't like the way the state is doing, we don't want to do this, we have concerns about this. So we end up getting our hand forced by this. I think that the proposal that we received, as we received it, reads like we are trying to minimize the number of ADUs built. And I think that it is unnecessarily burdensome. I think site plan review can be really important because we have all of these different scenarios with our properties, but it is expensive. And part of the reason housing is so expensive here that drives up the cost of housing is because it's expensive to build. And so I don't really want to endorse a process for every single unit that is going to add thousands and thousands of dollars to every cost, and it's going to add, weeks to months. So I would be very interested to know if there are ways to streamline or expedite site permit review that would cut down on that, right? The only way that I would want to support this as drafted would be if we could find another way to incentivize affordable housing. Like maybe this is what we have to do for the state minimum, but we're going to make it easier to build affordable based units. I think we could do something like that. But as it reads, I mean, I just think 7,500, if you're just looking at lot size, that's, I don't know, 20%, 25% of city lots. I don't think that's what our residents are expecting. That's not what people ask me for and what they want. So I don't think, with all due respect to my colleagues, I do not believe that ADUs will be the death of the city.
Okay.
I understand it will create impacts. But I think if we had a better sense of what we're trying to do, we could guide people in that direction. So I would be all for a streamlined site review process. I would support, I think it's very confusing to have a lot size in the ordinance for zoning when there actually isn't a lot size minimum per state law. I think that's confusing to residents. I don't think that should be in there. And I am all for working on many cities have strategies that work for the problems that we're talking about right now. I was talking to Councilor Simonelli, before he left, about rental registries. Well, that's a thing that exists in many cities in Massachusetts, and it gives us another tool to hold landlords accountable because we know who they are, and we could require them to escrow things, right? We're definitely not going to arbitrarily tax landlords. Let the record reflect. But nonetheless, we can charge them for their services. I am absolutely here for talking about requiring parking. If we're concerned people have too many cars, you can limit the number of cars per unit that can be registered in the city. We can do that. Many cities do that. So I really do want to see, yes, I think that, Wellesley and Winchester will find ways to have this be nicer for them. That is the benefit of money, power, and privilege. But I see the cost of housing as one of the top threats to our community. It is driving people out so fast that they can't even figure out how to make the rest of it work. That's the number one threat to the stability, the integrity, the vitality of our communities. People can't afford to live here. That's what's going to turn us into Cambridge for all of that, for all of that fear. So I think it's really important that we figure out how to build a little bit more and be a little more reasonable. I do not think 7,500 lot size is reasonable for a city that looks like this.
So can I ask a follow-up to that though? How do you make it, when you say drive them out, there's nothing in this ordinance that says they're gonna be affordable, and they're not.
What I'm saying, one, I don't know if you were hearing this, but I would love to, if this is what we were going to pass the way it was proposed from the staff, then we should do something else that makes it easier to build affordable and incentivize people to do that. Because right now it's
I think there's a way to do that.
I believe that there
We're
is.
talking over here, so what we could do, because for the older people who might not be able to have the resources to actually do an ADU, who would really benefit, we could use our Affordable Housing Trust Fund to give them the funds to actually do an ADU. By using the funds, we may be able to put the owner occupied and affordability conditions, not in the zoning, but as a condition of the funds to do the ADU. So there might be a way to get the affordability and a home owner occupied with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Yeah, I mean that's a slam. That's the way the ordinance should have been written anyway. That's the way the state should have done it anyways.
So I know, so I'm saying I think if we comply with the state minimum, we can add on from an affordability perspective, which also does, research show, require less parking. Yes, that is true. So I'm all for that, but I think that we just have to do something that passes the sniff test here and that finds us a way forward to help build in ways that make sense for our neighborhoods, that comply with the general character of the neighborhood. I did have a question. Is there any, that is my perspective on this. I think housing is an urgent issue and a moral crisis in this community and in the state. I'll say that on record every time. My question is, are there standards that site plan review commissions use to make decisions, or is it just their general opinion?
It comes down to opinion, yes.
But I mean, there's not like
it's not a
you're looking for A, B, C, and D.
There's not a regulated process like there is with the Board of Appeals, who have statutory findings they have to make. It's closer to a planning board special permit process where they take certain factors into consideration, but it's up to their opinion. And there's a limit to what they're allowed to.
Right.
To review.
But have you ever seen like just better guidelines on process for a site plan review like this that would kind of makes it clear what they're actually trying to adjudicate rather than just, you have no idea what you're getting?
Well, I think the ordinance that we put, in front of you guys provides that. It provides, we're talking about the lot size lot. We're talking about the lot size as if it's a barrier for someone to go to an ADU process, and it's not. You can have a 3,000 square foot lot. You can go to a site plan review process for ADU. So you're not limiting who can do it.
You have to pay a lot of money to get to that point. I think that's what I get hung up on, to Councilman McDonald's point. In my opinion, what's going to happen is folks who have a lot of resources will know how to just stick with the process.
That's correct.
And so you'll end up with people who have an incentive to spend a lot because they're going to extract a lot of value from that once they get through. And like your everyday folks that are making a working class income and might be right on the edge of these requirements are not going to have the capital. They're not going to see a path in this process. And they may have an aging parent that they can't afford to put into a nursing home. And this could be something where they could afford to, take out the equity from the primary and put $150,000 ADU and then hire home health aides and then not exhaust their retirement. I want to make sure that we're actually helping people that are the folks that we're all saying we're concerned about.
Already.
And it feels like we could simplify this a little bit more to get to that.
Yep.
If I could add just one thing, I don't think though we can say homeowner who wants to have your mom live there because she's a senior,
Sure.
you do one process. Oh, Mr. Absentee Landlord, you're going through the whole entire process and you're providing every plan and going through every review. And the butters are going to be notified for you. They're not going to be notified for you.
Sure.
I think there's something we really have to be, if you're talking about being sued and lawsuits, and I mean, there's definitely, I think we have to treat all of these with consistency as much as we can. If I could just add, noting every house on every street, there's no even consistency on streets. So to even be able to say, this house needs site plan review for an addition, this one doesn't. So even to say accessory structures need them, but maybe additions don't, well, why would an addition to a 3-family on a 2,000 square foot lot not need one? The impacts, I think, really are gonna be case by case by case. In every neighborhood and every street, as far as I can tell. So I think it's very difficult to draw that line.
If I can just add to that, when it comes to the cost, we haven't even talked about the building code. So when it comes to the building code and turning single to a 2 or 2 to a 3 or 3 or 4, the building code costs are going to be extremely burdensome. And you're going to require full-blown plans to do this. This isn't something a homeowner's going to draw something on a Dunkin' Donuts napkin and get rented for.
Yeah.
So when you consider that, really the cost for a site plan review process is equivalent to going to the Board of Appeals for a variance. And people do that for decks.
Oh, I know.
People build a $4,000 deck and they spend the money to go to the Board of Appeals to get a variance to make it bigger than they're supposed to. And the cost is really,
What's the cost? It's trivial
compared to what it's going to cost to have a set of plans to put together and to build something. It's minor.
Councilor Taylor's been waiting for a very long time. I want to get to her.
So I want to add that I have kind of an interesting perspective, kind of somewhere right in the middle. I grew up in a 3-family house from a single mother that was able to be a stay-at-home mother because we had 2 rental units. And we were lucky to have that. We had an in-law apartment in the basement. So my uncle was able to stay with us and we had family around. And that's how my mother grew up, with multifamily houses, her generation in Edgeworth. And I think that this is great for owner occupied. I also see a different side of it from affordability and from a housing standpoint. And where I do housing for a living and I'm in and out of rental apartments, what I see is that there aren't occupancy permits. People are like, what we're renting out in Malden because we don't have enough checks and balances in place is not dignified, nor is it affordable housing. And this is a real problem when we have 57% of our city as renters. My biggest concern we talk about, I am all for affordable housing. It is everything that I could ever want in the city for us to have real affordable housing, but we can't do that if we keep allowing the landlords and the absentee landlords to basically run away with the money of our city. That's why there's no affordable housing, because you can rent 3 rooms for $3,000 and you can add on another attachment, you know, I don't want us to get to that point. I want some sort of review to make sure that we are allowing, you know, we are making sure that our residents are the ones that are benefiting from ADUs and not people taking over our city. Because I see the opposite every single day, 20 times a day. I've seen it with my own housing struggles. I've seen it with other people's housing struggles. It's the number one reason that a lot of realtors won't touch rentals. You know, because they're not getting those occupancy permits. So I would like to see added, if we're doing a site plan review, that we add, they have to be up to date on their occupancy permits if they're a landlord. Like, that they have to be providing dignified living in this city for the people who live here and want to stay here. If I could add affordability to that, if there's another way that we can look at redoing our ordinances to help out with affordability more and to help home, you know, owner occupied folks be able to add on, 100% we need to do that, but we need to make sure that we're not just giving it all away, because we've done that as a city for a really long time. I mean, that was, you know, and I don't want to see that continue, just in general. So if we could add making sure that they're up to date on occupancy permits and, like, you know, that it's not, that has to be in there in order for them to add anything else, that would be wonderful for me, because it's not happening in the city.
Councilor Crowell?
Did you?
Yeah, but that's all right. You're on, are you on?
That's great.
Okay, thanks. Just, appreciate it. So I just want to echo a lot of the stuff that Councilman McDonald said about the affordability. We all know that that's what we need. We need more housing. This is why this, you know, the state is doing that. There's got to be a checks and balance. I understand that why. In 1 minute when you're talking, I'm like, yeah, everybody should go before a site. It makes sense. And then I'm like, wait a second. People like myself too, we all have stories. My father would have been here had I been able to add on years ago. I've talked about this. I tried to do it. We couldn't do it. He'd be here. I'd be in such a different position. So it's very important to me, and especially with seniors. I know of 5 right off the top of my head, seniors who live in this city in different wards that can't afford their house. Their houses are falling apart. They can't move out. If they could have someone in, like I do know that. So I don't think that this is going to crash our city. Our city's already falling. People can't afford to live here and they're moving out already. So I think that if there's a balance of how, and I know that's just something that we're all going to work towards, but I don't like just kind of railing off out of the gate that this is going to be a horrible thing for our city, because it's not. It's not. And if we know, we can't say that everybody's going to be able to afford to do this. Even so, like absentee landlords, you're right. We got to keep an eye on that no matter what. We already have slumlords in the city. So we hear about them all the time. It's a separate issue, but also combined in here, because it's, yeah, our city is already, we do need the housing, so we have to just figure this out. And I just don't want to come across as starting out with like, this is the most terrible thing we've ever heard. It's not, there's a balance. Thank you.
Councilman Crowell?
Thank you. I do like what the staff has put forward. I do think the site plan review, I agree with Councilor Taylor. And even like the woman that was here 2 weeks ago for, to say personal privilege, but public comment, and I spoke to her after. She lived on Ferry Street, and you know, she's somebody that has been really wanting to add an in-law apartment. She can stay there. That's the one that we wanted to do, and I love the idea of incentivizing that, and it's owner occupied, and it's affordable. If there's a way we can do that. But then when we were talking about, again, she lives on Ferry Street. She lives next to our 3-family houses, and she was talking about, she's like, my neighbors will build one more. She was like, can't park where it is. There's lots of other problems. That's what I'm afraid we're going to see. Not what it's really meant for the seniors, you know, all that kind of good stuff that we really want to, so we can get to that point. But it will be the absentee landlord that says, great, I'll get an extra couple $1,000. I can, you know, used to have storage on in the attic. Now you don't, because I'm going to throw someone else up there. And it really does have in my area additional parking. I got more calls. Thankful that we didn't have the snow emergency, because we can't park anyway. we can't park anyway. Now we're not gonna be able to park. What am I gonna do? And since we had school today, they couldn't even park in the school parking lots. So, I mean, I have that and everyone has that fear. So adding more without adding parking, I agree. We want people to walk, ride, take the bus, all that good stuff. But people do have cars. They don't go food shopping and all these other things. If they can't, they might want to use it on the weekend, but it's going to be sitting there for the rest of the time. So I like the plan. I do like having the occupancy. If that is way too much.
Yeah.
The occupancy permit, but I do think that what we have laid out here, you don't want to make it onerous, but I think you need to have some checks and balances, and just letting it go all over is crazy. And I do think keeping the 75,000, the
75,000.
100 square feet is.
How about that one?
Cemetery.
How about that?
That's what we have with Vera, not like we have that for the single, we have this. So we have something similar, and if people come in, again, depends on how if land is sort of broken up. You can have this, a big lot of land, or you can have a small one that has really a lot more space. And so I do think having it individualized makes a lot more sense.
I had Councilor O'Malley.
So one of the things is, and I talked to Councilor Spatafora about this, one of my concerns is that for a long time, our single-family home zoning was 5,000 square feet lot size or less. We changed it to 7,500. I would say that probably 90% of Malden does not comply with our current zoning. I'm concerned that our existing zoning now, if the state was to look at it, they would say our single-family home zoning is unreasonable as it currently exists for single-family homes, because no parcels barely comply. So if we now take those, what I am viewing as unreasonable zoning regulations and apply them to ADUs, which they are looking at, they're going to say these are de facto unreasonable. And that's one of the reasons we're in this problem, is because our entire city is zoned for single-family homes, but there are not that many single-family homes. The single-family homes are in Ward 5, in Ward 3. There might have been single-family homes in the 1800s, but those are all converted to 2 and 3 families. And so I'm concerned that if we put things like this that I think it's pretty clear are unreasonable, it's going to get struck down. And then we have no regulations, and people can literally do anything. So I would rather try to make them as reasonable as possible, so we can say, okay, a lot of our lot sizes are more than 5,000, so that's a reasonable thing. And I think that, like with the open space we talked about, if you take the 1,000 square feet of open space, I think that that's reasonable, because if you look at the vast majority of parcels, they have 1,000 square feet of open space. Not all of them, but the vast majority of them do. So I do think we need to really take a hard look at that. I'm not afraid of this. Like I've shared with you and others, like the reason why I could have go to Holy Cross, the reason why I was able to go to BC was because I was able to use my house as an equity loan. Like that was my student loans. And I feel, and it's a 2-family, it was once income generating. And I think that everyone in the community should have that opportunity to build local wealth. It's something I've been talking about. I have some amendments. I hope y'all won't get offended. I incorporated the ones that Councilor Winslow mentioned, and I added a couple of my other ones, because I do want to make sure that we address the things that are really going to impact our community, and I think that should be detached. If someone wants to put like a basement in-law, if someone wants to do an addition, if someone wants to do like dormers, like we know how to deal with that. That happens all the time. We don't know how to deal with people turning their garages into houses. So I do think it makes sense to do more vetting on that, because that's what I think is going to be most impactful.
So can you separate it though? Before you pass that out, can you separate it?
I think you can, and that's what the state said on the webinars. The webinar,
You're
they said
saying separate detached to site plan review, or?
detached to site plan, attached, not through
Right, you
site
can do whatever
plan.
you want with site plan review. I think.
Because here's the thing.
But isn't it you treat one different than the other?
No, because on the webinar, they said it would not be reasonable, it may not be reasonable if you require a site plan review process for an ADU, but don't require it for a single family home. We do not require a site plan review for single family homes. But then they added a caveat that said, but it may be reasonable if you do it for detached ADUs. So that was like as clear as day to me.
But who requires site plan review for single family homes?
No one, that's why it would be unreasonable.
If I could,
Yeah, but-
you actually require more than site plan review. You potentially require variances, as Council Winslow started by saying all these additions all these expansions, we require single families to comply with the ordinance.
Because
Why would you not require
But they need.
a second unit to comply with it? That's what doesn't make any sense.
Because
It's required for the single, yeah.
So the reason why so many of our parcels have to go for variances is because our underlying base zoning is not reasonable. That's why they have to go for variances, is because our zoning does not reflect reality.
Yeah, but can I just interrupt real quick? This was, the zoning change, I was here when it changed. The zoning was changed because when they did a master plan, and had like 5,000 residents come out, and they talked about it, they talked about walkability, affordability, green space, open space, and density. That's were their concerns. So the council took that and said, we're gonna have a moratorium in building, both downtown and single-family homes. Because I want to put a pool in my backyard, and I don't want the guy 3 feet next to me looking in the pool. So when you say it was done out of this willy-nilly, the residents of this community wanted more space. And everyone at this table talks about the environment. We're gonna pave over every green space. And the last thing I want to say is, we don't have a problem with housing in this community. We have a problem with affordable housing. And I don't mean this disrespect, because I didn't support it either. We had an opportunity to develop an 8-acre site in Malden Hospital. Where's the housing? Why didn't everybody up here support the housing up there?
Respectfully, I did. It's not on the
No,
record.
no, the neighbors didn't want it. No, so did I.
No, I hear you. This is before I was a counselor.
No, but I'm just saying, so did I. So where was everybody saying we put affordable housing? Nobody wanted it up there. You know why? Because of traffic, and they wanted green space. So you can't have both sides of this equation and say, I mean, what frustrates me is, you can put a pool in, you can have a pool in your backyard or a deck, and now somebody who is pre-existing non-conforming, I don't know who you blame, okay, I wasn't here when they did the settlement, and you got a garage on that line, and you're gonna put an ADU up there, and they're gonna look in your backyard.
That should go through site.
Who in here wants that? And don't tell me you do, because you're lying.
No, I agree.
I have it.
You're not coming to see me.
I'm just gonna hand out, like, cause I did take his and put it in line with the red line, because I think it's only fair.
I wasn't talking, I'm saying we had the opportunity.
No,
Yeah.
I hear you, and I agree on
They had
that.
55 and over, I love it.
All right, can I have my final word and then we can go to Ryan?
I think it's very real.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions while
Okay,
Councilor Nally is
yeah,
passing
okay,
it
now
down?
I'm just gonna, can I have my final word and then?
One more question, and then we'll let you wrap it up.
We have the ability to reevaluate these guidelines that we put in, as long as we don't make them any stricter. We can make them looser, correct? Like, so could we commit to like seeing over the next however long period of time makes sense? How many of these that come in are coming in from owner occupied? How many are coming in from absentee landlords? How that actually plays out and what, I would not want to stop, somebody from being able to generate more wealth for their family, like, or anything like that. I see a lot with rentals and housing and absentee landlords. I see it way too often to be comfortable just not having a site plan review. I wouldn't want somebody to put, I have been in houses where people throw a bed in a dilapidated basement and they're renting it out. Like you go in and it's not just our community. No, it's not. But if there's a way that like.
But Nelson is gonna review it when you go to get a permit and you need an occupancy.
Right, but that's the thing. If you
don't want to spend 50 grand to add an ADU, you're going to do
we don't
what you're
have
doing.
a site plan review for someone adding an ADU to a basement or an attic, right? There's nothing that triggers them going to Nelson for an occupancy permit. I bet no,
the ordinance can say that.
the ordinance can, but like, that's why we would want it to go through a site plan review. So if we see them working on that project, because those are things that can be done kind of like.
But can you clarify this? Is it true you don't need an occupancy
I'm
permit?
sorry, I was reading this, I didn't really get it.
You do need an occupancy permit,
For new construction, do they need to have an occupancy permit?
New construction, meaning building a new building?
No.
So the only time you have to get an occupancy certificate by state law is if you're gonna build a new building or if you're gonna change use. That's when you have to. Now, outside of the have tos, we have the ability to require you to do whatever we want, right? So what our policy in our department is, if a person is doing a project in their house which modifies the interior of the house to a point where they're adding bedrooms, moving bedrooms, adding things, we make them apply for an occupancy permit so that we can memorialize on the occupancy permit, this house has 3 bedrooms on the first floor, 1 on the second, 1. So that down the road, when the neighbors complain, we go there for a complaint, we have something to look back at and go, no, they get the right number of bedrooms or.
So ADU could trigger the occupancy.
We will, it doesn't matter what happens with this, we will be requiring occupancy permits for ADUs because we need to memorialize that this person has an ADU because if they come back for another one, they have to go for a special permit.
My feeling is though, if we're canceling the site plan review on if they're turning a basement, there may be nothing that triggers us going out for an occupancy permit.
That's the final
Yes,
building
Right, no,
permit.
if he's saying an occupancy permit for ADU, you were saying you want the dwelling, is this a legal 3-family? You want them to prove what the existing occupancy is before they're adding the
Well,
new
that
unit.
was one of them. I want them to prove that they have, if they're renting out to tenants, because it's my understanding that if you're doing a rental, when you switch tenants, you should be getting a new occupancy
The
permit.
rental
No, that's a
inspection.
rental unit inspection to the health
Okay,
department, so it's a different thing.
that
And
we,
people don't do it. No.
it doesn't happen now.
But like but they.
And that's what I would want to see on file,
A
to
rental
make sure that they've done that.
But if you want to build, if you want to add a bedroom, or if you want to do anything to your house, you have to get a permit from Nelson, and you have to get rough inspections, they're in your house like many, many times. And you want them there because they're protecting you from the shitty contractors out there.
That's the legal way.
Right.
If you go to a public properties unit, where they have
No.
locks on the doors.
Nothing
Nothing's
right's gonna
gonna-
prevent
yeah.
that.
But that's my point, like, we're still gonna have that and just more people. I mean, this doesn't get these people in affordable units.
Well, and that's what I'm concerned is if we have if we do have unreasonable things, what people are gonna do is they're just gonna do these under the table.
They're gonna do it on the table anyways. That's,
And then just like.
Okay.
when you say unreasonable, this is gonna cost $50,000.
I want to have Michelle respond and then have Councilor McDonald and Councilor
I
Wentz.
just had one question. What's the distinction if it's a detached or they're adding a massive addition onto a house? Why would that not need site plan review?
I think one is a garage.
No, but why are you proposing?
Massive can't be more than 900 square feet. so
Right, but
massive is
it
not-
could be double, could be a 900 square foot house that's adding the 900, so double, and if they're adding a whole nother unit, why
That's
wouldn't
what the
it?
other dimensional controls.
No, but I'm
could
saying,
be.
why would an addition not need site plan review?
Well, because what?
In
the
your
state's-
opinion.
'cause no, this is the state's opinion. The state's opinion is that if you don't require a site plan review for a single family home or a site plan review for an addition, then it's de facto unreasonable to require it for a attached ADU.
But that was
But for
one
a
of the.
detached ADU, they kind of gave us a little leeway on the webinar and said, but it may be reasonable for a detached, because it's like, how often do you turn the garage?
Just to be clear on that though, because we were on that
There were
webinar
different
also.
webinars,
And sometimes when things get said too many times at city council meetings, suddenly they become the truth. That was not, the state did not say that was a fact. The
They
state,
said,
the
listen,
state
man.
said the possibility is that it might possibly be looked at that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the other
So
one's
they didn't come out of the regulation and say,
In the guidelines, it says we can do site plan review for either. So just to be clear, the
Okay.
webinar was all over the place.
But that's if.
But you're making a
But that's
distinction, you
if
think it would
we
be.
already have site plan review for single family.
Nobody does.
A suggestion.
And Councilor O'Malley, if I may, I think what you were also saying is that the attached versus detached, there's different dimensional controls in terms of the impacts on neighbors that folks were asking
Well, it's a
about.
concern that Councilor Spatafor is if you have a garage that is right over your back, like next to your backyard, 1 foot away from it, and you have a jacuzzi or something else in your backyard, you might not want to now have,
I have a pizza oven, by the way, not a jacuzzi.
not other people.
But what about the addition? Why do you think an addition would impact the neighbor?
Because additions are usually not as close to the neighbor's property line as garages, which are often 1 or 2 feet from the property line in Malden. Versus the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet from the property line.
If they are 10 feet,
But they're,
because they might have a variance.
yeah, or they're all largely non-conforming now.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
the state pretty much said that it may be reasonable for a detached ADU, which I think is gonna be more invasive, that's my opinion. I can't justify it.
Oh, I was just curious what the distinction between addition and attached, in your opinion. Not the-
Whether something's attached or not attached.
No, I'm saying, why do you think one has an impact and one doesn't?
I can think of it.
Closeness to the other people.
You are-
Okay.
I've already said ad
Yeah,
nauseam.
I want to make sure we get to Counselor McDonald's.
Mhm.
You got a point of clarification.
Yeah, I did. No, I'm gonna try to remember. After that. No, it's okay. I also feel like I appreciate your point, Councilor Melly, and I do think I just think reasonableness has to be a really important test that our residents also feel that what we're doing is reasonable. So I like the distinction between detached and non-detached. I also feel like if there were a threshold of addition that you're changing the footprint of the building by X percentage, that could trigger it as well. Because I understand the point of like if you're doubling the building, that's also pretty significant. But if you're adding 3 feet on one side to get I don't care. So I think that the question I'm trying to get to this question for Councilor Taylor. Because I don't think a site plan review is necessary. I mean, it can pull in the neighbors, but I think we could require notifications to abutters and inspections prior to at the point of a permit is filed. That could actually get us at. I think would probably get us more to this because the site plan review is not gonna do the same. It's gonna do a different thing. That's about dimensional controls. And so I wonder if that would be something that we should require for just all ADU permits. Is just require an inspection. It doesn't take your guys very long to get out there and see what the status of things are.
This is a question I actually had sent to Michelle because I'm wondering if we have to verify square footage.
Yeah.
It feels like a smart moment to maybe just get eyeballs on places.
So I would totally support that. And I just had another question. Does this seem like this could actually be a route out of problem property unit situations for owners that would want to take it? Like if you have an illegal second unit and we discover that, at the point at which you qualify for an ADU, could you convert that to an ADU, become above board? I mean, you have to do it. You have to do it properly. But is this something that they would do? No, could do. Why not?
Because when we go to problem properties about complaints of over occupancy, we're not walking into beautifully constructed additions or attics that people turned into these wonderful quaint little apartments that people are living in. We go into basements next to heating systems and dirt floors that there's 5 people living in, or a unit that they have locks on every single door.
So it's just too hard.
And there's bunk beds with 3 people in each room. So these people aren't looking for some lawful, wonderful way to suddenly, abide by the rules. So I think we're going to have our problem properties like we always do, maybe more, because there's a certain number of people that think that they can just do stuff because the state law says they can do it. So we'll probably, I don't see that changing, right, Maria?
No.
And then we have the added administrative burden of dealing with these things that go along with it. So
Councilor Winslow, do you want to wrap it up and vote?
Yeah, I put this out. I mean, I know we're in a tight time frame. I just put it out. I mean, I think for me, sort of a little bit of coming from where Councilor Mann is, I just want to understand and give whoever's making the decision a sense from the council what is some reasonableness. And that is really what I've seen happen in my neighborhood, and have that be like that pathway. So if someone starts down the pathway, they know they have a shot, whether it's just out of the question. So that's really that's really what I want to know. I mean, I know people have gone to the zoning board of appeals, and that wasn't a super burdensome thing. So I mean, it is. I mean, so I don't necessarily not oppose the site plan review, but I do think that it is important to have some guidance and make sure that the ones that we think are reasonable enough get maybe expedited a site plan review, or or detached units are treated a different way. So that's one of the type of things. I think that if the state does back away from the half mile of from bus routes, I would like to see a different standard that we would apply that people do, within a reasonable distance of a bus route, that type of thing. And I do think but I do, Councilor Colin Hayes, Councilor McDonald. I mean, we just went through an election where one of the things we heard from the electorate was inflation was bad. And when you look at it, housing inflation is one of the worst things. So one candidate made a big deal of that. And so we have an opportunity on the local level. Yeah, we can't necessarily split it all up, but if you don't make an effort, I mean, it's, what happened to markets? You have more opportunities for places for people to live. That should help bring down the market. I mean, I know when we built these hundreds of units here, Malden's rental rates moderate more than other communities. So it is possible. And I just think that it is the thing of trying to figure that out. I mean, I empathize with Council Simonelli, and if we need to do more things like the rental registry and do more on the problem property stuff to make sure that 6-family places we are on top of that, it's good. But I also see that that there's a lot of good people in this community that can do the right thing. And I just think that we need to create a little bit more balance and a pathway that's clear for that group of people. So, thank you. So, good discussion. So, all right. And so now I guess I'll be chair again. And Councilor O'Malley, you have your. Now you
So I
explain
don't
your.
want to go through this boringly, but like this presentation here incorporates most of the changes that Councilor Winslow recommended. I got rid of your suggestion of having no parking restrictions. I kept the parking restrictions in. The main thing here is it differentiates between attached and detached. What I'm saying is only detached will go through site plan review, because I think those are the most invasive, because they're often closer, they're closer to the property line. It's reducing it to 5,000 square feet, which I think reflects the reality. I'm talking about for the setbacks, it's what is proposed or existing, whichever is lesser. I'm proposing to reduce the rear to 15, or if you say 15 or existing, whichever is lesser. The principal building coverage is odd to be restricted. It's odd to put the principal building coverage here, because that looks like a back end way of denying an ADU, because you could have a situation where the building coverage is more than 30% of the principal building. So I'm saying whichever is greater, because I think that would be viewed as unreasonable. I think that the accessory building has to match the single family coverage, which is 30%. And I'm talking about measuring the max height by 2.5 stories for the existing height measured by the highest point of the principal dwelling.
Excuse me, right, just for clarity or clarification here, under both sides.
Yeah.
It should say 20 feet or existing, whichever is lesser. Remove per side.
Oh, yeah, correct.
Because it's a both side.
Correct. So under both sides, it should strike.
Remove the 2 words per side.
Thank you for that. That's okay.
So in the 2.5 stories, if you have a 3-story, if you have a 3-family.
Yeah, I honestly don't understand how stories work.
But I don't understand why. So you allow it to go higher.
No, I actually have no clue how stories work, because.
But you changed it.
No, I said to strike the 30 feet, because we have a strange thing where we have a height limit of what, it's 50 feet, but we have so many buildings that are higher than 50 feet, so I don't understand how heights work in Malden, to be honest with you.
So the height and stories are 2 different things. They're not related anyway. There's no correlation between height and stories. So height is height. Height is measured to the mean point of the roof. So if you have an old school colonial house with a triangle gable, halfway up the triangle, that's the height. So your building is actually, the peak is actually higher than your.
Yeah, I was asking him why he changed it. What was his mind behind that? That's my question was. But if you don't get it,
Yeah, just because.
Okay, let's see. All right.
Because there are so many properties that are more than this.
All right. Let's see. I am the chair.
So, yeah.
All right. So Paul had a question.
I'm just going through.
Okay.
I want you to understand, there's nothing you can do with this kind of a law to make this a better community. You need to look at places like Lexington, Georgetown, all those places that can add on a unit, and you don't even know it. All right, that's who this law was passed for. The people that are that's rich there. They're rich, the land, they got a lot of land, they can add on to it. That's who passed this law. Where the hell are you, you're gonna have every street looking like Stearns and Linwood Street, and all 3 family houses down there. That's the way it's gonna look in Edgeworth, I know that.
Plenty
If
of
you
parking.
dangle a $2,000 unit in front of any homeowner, and more than likely they'll take it. All right, there's no room to park now, so just get the thought out of your head, okay? You're gonna remember us as the council that screwed up this city.
If I could just finish my
Okay, Councilor Miller.
presentation, I do want to address what Councilor Condon is saying. I think one of the things that is going to happen actually, and I think that Edgeworth is going to be a big benefiter of this. No, truly, listen.
Come down to St. Rocco's, and we'll tell you how good it's gonna be.
No, but there are a lot of accessory dwelling units that are not currently permitted. And I think that this is going to allow a pathway for people who have in-law apartments in our community. I think Edgeworth has a number of these. It will allow, has a number of the accessory dwelling units that may or may not be permitted. It's going to allow them to legalize them, and it's going to bring in more tax revenue. And it's going to require an occupancy.
I got
permit.
4,300 square feet with 2-family house, so do most of the houses around. What are you gonna do with that?
I mean, as someone who grew up in this community, I know that there are a lot of accessory dwelling units in people's basements that have kitchens and have bathrooms, and people live there, and they're not permitted. This
But
would,
we need to discuss this, right? You also have to make them, unless you don't care about the fire, and I'm saying it a bad way, unless we don't care about fire safety, because we just want to put more units there, you have to have a second means of egress, windows in the bathrooms. And again, if you're gonna do that, you have to pay money to do that. So this idea is, you don't have money to do this, but you have money to do this. And I told you, the house that I got an investment piece of property, the one I bought on Main Street, I had to cut windows in. 15 grand to cut 3 windows in. You know why I did it? Because I get $3,500 a month. And now you know what I can do is I can add a second floor, and I'll charge another $3,000, and they're gonna look in the neighbor's yard, and not being an ass, they're in your ward. So when they come and say, hey, why is Spanner for a building so they can look at my dining room table? Buy right. Buy right. No affordability, no home ownership, no parking space. You're gonna get maybe $1,500 more. And if there's a kid in that room, oh, let's see how the formula works out later. Because again, there's gonna be no kids in these units either. That's the joke we play in this room. It's perfect. Like Nelson said, these are not houses that, oh, they're gonna be done this way, and it's gonna be, that will be the small majority of the city. That's the problem. Because she goes through the units, I see what happens. People get taken advantage of it. We're gonna have property owners build to the max potential, and I told you guys this before, this idea of affordability, what it made is everybody in this room rich who owns a house, because now you're single family. I got an email the other day from a realtor, ADUs, you can sell it now as a 2-family. They're gonna take the money, Ryan, and they're gonna run. They're gonna run.
but to Council Taylor's
And I agree with her.
perspective about safety, and yours too, if you're allowing a way for people to legalize their existing ADUs that are now pre-existing non-conforming, if they've been there for more than 10 years, we can't require them to rip them out. They're not up to code, but they're pre-existing non-conforming.
Yes, you can.
I thought after 10 years you can.
It's not illegal. It's done with a permit. Anything done with, in accordance with a building permit, you have 10 units to go back and say, sorry, I screwed up, I shouldn't have given you a permit, take it up. Anything done illegally, illegal use is illegal building permit, illegal work with a building permit, there's no statute of limitations.
You would take it out?
So,
And just to further that point, people who have existing illegal units to make 2-family, they have to gut the whole thing anyways to comply with the current building code and energy code. You're not just gonna give them an occupancy permit because they have a kitchen, a bathroom, a window. They have to create 1-hour fire separation between both units. If it's a 2, when you turn that into a 3, that 3rd floor has to be sprinkled.
Yep. Second means of egress from the top floor?
These aren't gonna be people, elderly people whose houses are falling down and can't afford to live there, who are gonna be doing this, because they don't have the money to do it. It's gonna be people who have the means and the motivation to do it, and that's people who have.
Or they're gonna buy those houses real cheap from those
That's what
people,
they're gonna do.
and then they're gonna have them in the rent.
That's exactly what they're gonna do.
Down.
That's exactly.
Because I see it every.
And it's a good thing for that to some degree, you get a better housing stock, but it's not gonna be affordable.
But it's not gonna be affordable. It's not.
It's gonna be people.
That's why there's rentals on the market now for $7,200 a month in Malden. 3,700 is the going rate. Like, you compare it to pay $4,000 a month for your rent. And that's just what we're seeing. And I want to protect our homeowners more than anybody. I want to see being able, like I said, I grew up in that type of housing. My mother grew up in that type of housing where she lived with her grandmother. Her grandmother owned two-family houses on Pearl Street. And that's how my entire family grew up, and it's how I grew up with like people in the house. I'd love to see more of that intergenerational living and a way to do that. From what I see on an everyday basis, this makes me a little bit nervous that we're not going to be serving the people that we want to be serving. And I want to see it, like, I would rather be a little bit cautious about this, see how it goes, and then reevaluate and see if there are other ordinances that we can put into play that really do affect affordability and accessibility for our homeowners that like play off of this, that obviously are not.
Can I ask one quick question? Just that example that was given. So taking a single family and adding a whole other unit to the top, right? That wouldn't be triggering this site plan review. That's an addition, but it wouldn't be detached. So adding a whole other unit on top of a unit, you still, if to
That's what the
counselor,
state said.
no, that's not what the state said.
That's what the state said.
Somebody in the webinar mentioned that, but to
The
Counselor
general
McDonald's
counsel
point,
for the state,
said that she thought that was her interpretation.
correct. Which they're the people who are going to interpret what's reasonable and not reasonable.
But did you see the other webinar where the other attorney in the state said something different? But besides that, to Counselor McDonald's point, you don't think there should be any criteria with the size of an addition? So adding a whole another unit above, you don't think there could potentially be an impact, that type of addition?
If I could finish going through the
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, well, I'm just throwing that out there as an idea.
So, I think we're on page 2. I decided to remove so-called. I didn't think the editorializing was appropriate for the zoning ordinance. But again, it's very clear that, the site plan review committee would be allowed to grant zoning relief where appropriate. I struck that there shall be no variance of this section. So if people want to get variances before the Board of Appeals, they should have the option to do that. To your point, section 4, general, I'm saying that any accessory dwelling unit shall conform with building, fire, sanitary codes, and written proof of compliance shall be provided prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit. Rather than the beginning of the site plan review process, because there's no way someone can provide written proof of compliance of building, fire, and sanitary codes prior to building anything.
No, I meant.
No, not you, this is what it says.
No, if they had additional units already. That was my thinking. No, obviously.
Of existing building.
If they had existing rental units already, if it was a 3-family, I don't know. Sorry.
Makes sense.
There was a distinct reason for that, and the reason for that is that there's no reason to make a person go through a site plan review process to add an ADU to their basement or their attic if they're physically unable to do it in accordance with the building code, fire code, or sanitary code. But you can review prior. That's what I do. That's what we do. Review projects for code compliance prior to them being built.
They could still do that. They could still come to you and have it voluntarily. Oh yeah, and like, I mean, it's not like an architect or anything, it's not.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is if you're gonna take out the part about us reviewing that prior to the building site plan review, there's no sense of putting this in there because they have to, that's basically what the state law says about getting an occupancy permit. The idea was that we would review a set of plans so that before the person went through the burdensome process of a site plan review, I could look at it and go, no, you can't comply with the building code. Don't waste your time and effort and money. Your basement is 6 feet tall. That's why that was in there. So the person had that evaluation done prior to getting their hopes up that they were actually going to get an accessory dwelling.
You would still be able to provide that feedback when they submit the plans.
Yes, we were trying to put that in order so that review took place first. If you come today for a special permit, right? You don't give me full-blown construction drawings for whatever it is you're going to build. Site plan, elevations, floor plans. Go to the planning board. If you get your special permit, great. Then we'll get into the actual building code stuff. This shouldn't be like that. This should be, no, give us full-blown construction drawings. then we'll decide if you can actually build this thing, and then you can go to the site plan process. So you don't waste your time.
But they could still do that. They could still.
Right, we were trying to make sure they were required to do it. That's all.
Would that help them with the 90 days that you're concerned about? Because to his point, if he doesn't look at them because they're not required, they go to site plan review and they say, we got all these questions. Now that clock's ticking, right?
Well,
I think what he's trying to say is you're gonna streamline.
Written like this, someone comes in and says, I want to go to site plan review for an ADU, and I say, well, give me all of your building, fire, and safety, health, compliance. And they say, no, I don't do that till you go to the architect.
Okay.
Go ahead. Then they get
but
site plan review.
what would they be providing you?
Drawings, construction drawings.
Oh, so you're.
Room areas, ceiling heights, ventilation, natural light.
No, but that, so you're talking about site plan review. I'm saying that would only apply for detached. I'm saying that attached should be by right. So if I come in, I don't need to do site plan review. I need to come in with all the construction drawings.
Yes, I'm only talking about that process if someone's going to a site plan review.
Okay,
Yes.
but if this is one that doesn't require site plan review, the only way,
No different than any other construction.
which is bringing the plans,
Right.
and you say these are not in compliance.
Right.
But what I'm hearing is the smart people come in before they do and spend all that money and say, hey, this is my existing conditions. Is this gonna work or not? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
The idea behind what we wrote was that the pathway was set so that you first got your check mark on your building, fire, compliance, and then you went forward to a site plan review. Now, mind you,
On the drawings.
we wrote this under the guise, everything was going site plan review. So you change that a little bit, but it should mimic that so that if someone is going to site plan review, they first prove that they can comply with all those things. So we're not wasting people's time with site plan review.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying, conform it, so it shall conform, the plan shall conform. Because right, would that be the accessory dwelling unit plan shall conform?
Sure.
Because that's what I was getting caught up in, is how can the accessory dwelling unit comply with these before it exists? So the plans shall conform.
Could I just quickly note for you to just look into this grant zoning relief? Because I don't think site plan review can grant zoning relief. They're not authorized or empowered under 48 to grant zoning relief. And that, I would defer to the city solicitor, that may be illegal to say that they're allowed or to attempt to authorize them to grant zoning relief.
But if we're
They're
saying,
not granting zoning relief.
but if we're saying that they can modify the dimensional controls,
They're not modifying them. They're determining if it's reasonable to apply them. They're not granting zoning relief as a special permit, a variance, some sort of discretionary review. And it specifically says we can't require that. So
I'm
I
not
think-
saying that they're required to, I'm saying they may.
No,
So they may is the word, site plan review may.
no, I don't think that they can. They can't do it.
No, we cannot do it.
Can they recommend?
Was anyone else confused about?
I think they just aren't empowered under state law, so you could put it in here, but they have no power to do that, so they'd still have to go to a board that's granted that.
But we're saying
Relief's
that,
a very specific thing that state law says, who can grant and who can't.
because the thing is, we're saying that if we're saying 7,500, but Nelson and Michelle have said, if you have a 3,000 square foot parcel, you can still go to site plan review. And the site plan review committee can say, okay, yeah, sure, that doesn't apply to you. The site, the right?
We can determine whether it's reasonable. It's not applied to that. It's not granting zoning relief. As Nelson said, that's a term of art.
It feels like it, right? Doesn't it? Isn't it functionally the same?
It feels like it, but.
It's the best law ever.
It feels like it. What the point is, there is a technical definition of relief in zoning law, and who can grant relief and who can't.
Okay.
So you don't want to use that term.
So just a note to look at that.
So the site plan review committee shall be empowered to,
Make a recommendation to the Board of Appeals?
oh, no.
Sorry, Carrie's, Carrie, do you want to?
Yeah, if I could just finish, I'm sorry. The last sections, the C and D about accessory dwelling units, this 12.28010, I do need some advice from.
Where are you?
H2, general 4. C and D.
Okay.
I would need some, I would like to better understand how 1228-010 is currently functioning and what the role of it is, because it's completely related to accessory uses. And so by us saying it doesn't apply, I'm trying to understand what the impact of that is. And then I was also toying with this D section about whether or not we should eliminate the requirement of the existing principal dwellings being required to get variances. Because, I mean, for instance, houses are built in 1800s with no parking because dark cars didn't exist. And there's no requirement they have parking. If they happen to have parking, I don't think that they should be penalized for having parking. And it's going to encourage people to remove parking preemptively.
So this was, if you, the ADU's going to, so this house exists, and now you're losing the open space and parking. Why would we
So for
want
instance,
them to allow lose the open space and parking?
So for instance, your house was built before zoning. You don't comply with the parking requirements in the city. If you wanted to put in a ADU, you were never required to comply with zoning because it existed before zoning. If you wanted to put in an ADU, why should we then retroactively apply zoning to you?
Because I'm adding another unit. Why should I be allowed to add another unit?
Because the state says it's a protected use.
The new unit is, but why would I want to eliminate parking and open space
Because
for
you're
the
not
unit
required
that
to
I
have
have?
it. You're not required to have it.
Because you're making your house more
I'm
non-conforming.
now becoming a two-family, right?
No, but
Your
Creating a new
house
violation.
that doesn't have
Right.
parking, which most houses in Holland don't have the adequate parking because they were built way before zoning was created. If you don't have parking now, if you have 3 bedrooms and you have 1 spot, it's fine. That's not a problem. If you want to take that spot away and put an ADU there, you're now making your house more non-conforming. So it is non-conforming, existing non-conforming, legal, not an issue. You're creating now a greater non-conformity by taking away a parking spot.
But for instance, if I have a garage that I don't park my car in, it's not used as parking, but it's used as storage.
Does it count towards parking?
Exactly. Well, no, because you don't require it. It's pre-existing
Yeah,
non-conforming.
but you also
There are
say,
so many garages in our community and driveways that are not used as parking.
But if
And
you,
so after 2 years, I mean, I don't know, does that useful
if you
house?
have a single family, you want to put a big addition on and you're eliminating parking and open space, guess what? You're going for a variance. Forget the ADU.
But we don't have to require that. We
You-
could
you're-
say that we don't want to require that.
And my question is, why would you? If it's going to be, you'd be treating that differently than a single family. The single family would need to go for the variance because it's losing parking. So to your point, we're not treating them the same.
But we can treat ADUs more leniently because it's a protected use, like churches and schools. Single families are not protected uses. ADUs, the first one, are. So that's just an idea. I don't exactly know where I fall on that, but I would like more advice on what the hell this means. Sorry. I'm talking about, on page 3 at the top, striking single family residential, because that's not what the law says. The law says dwelling unit. The dimensional controls of C, accessory dwelling unit shall not be regulated by this related to single. I'm basically saying it will not be regulated by the single family residential dwelling. We're creating a new section. And then this D thing where I struck shall but may not, it probably calls you to say may, like basically it may comply with the dimensional controls, but it's not required to. And then I changed in E, I struck the smallest, we talked about this last time, I struck the smallest existing dwelling unit.
we go back to that, what does that mean? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I feel like that for a lot of us.
No, but again, to go back to the scenario you're adding on, if you need a variance to add on your pool, now you're gonna add an ADU, you're saying you don't have to go to the Board of Appeal?
Which one are you on?
D.
May, so, and let's read it, huh? Any expansion of a building's footprint, I'll be honest with you, everything is confusing, I'm not gonna lie. Any expansion of a building's footprint or addition to an existing principal dwelling or an accessory dwelling unit may comply with all dimensional controls.
This says may, you put may not.
No, so on my copy, I struck out. Well,
Oh, okay, that
happens.
Yeah, well, actually, it doesn't. I realize it doesn't, because it may or may not. So because may doesn't require anything, it's actually functionally the same.
Page 3.
It may not, or it may. I realize that you don't need to put the word not, because it's whether it says may or may not, it's the same thing.
No, it could, may not imply it is not permissible.
Oh, that's true.
Not necessarily. Why is that what you're trying to say?
It may or it may not
The
imply.
intonation changes.
I still don't understand.
I don't either, to be honest with you.
Okay.
But I do know that we're not requiring it to comply with all dimensional controls, because we're saying that the site plan review committee can do whatever it does. Size, I'm changing it from the smallest existing dwelling unit to gross floor area, which is what the law says, and then I change it from greater, which is not correct, to lesser. I also don't know the difference between lesser or smaller.
If the law does say smaller, doesn't it? Even if it's the law, why don't you use what the law says?
Yeah, we can do smaller. The last thing I added in writing is this D on page 4, and I wrote that the public hearing for, yours are weird, but it should say, public hearing shall not be held open beyond 90 days from the opening of the public hearing. So this will avoid a situation where a public hearing is open, it's held open for 5 years and never closed.
I don't think that happened.
Yeah, that does happen.
But what happens if the participant needs more time?
They can file, what do we call these things? No, we did it with the tolling agreement.
What?
A tolling agreement. We did it with small cell antennas.
Just all parties agree.
I've not, in 23 years, I've never seen a hearing open more than 5 years, more than open.
Site plan review.
That wasn't held for 5 years.
How long was the Rose Quarry one?
Because they're not done.
It
They're not done.
it was,
They're building more buildings
It
now.
was a long time ago, right?
it was
But they're not
tabled
done.
so they could provide additional information.
And the state, and the highways changed.
But that's a very complicated situation. This is.
Yeah, but they're not done building, that's why it's still open.
But it's a thing that was in the back of my head that I was trying to.
I mean,
Put in
4,000 units to an ADU is a big stretch.
No, but it's
It wasn't one site plan review process. Each project was its own.
So he's talking about lot 12, which was held open so that the petitioner could go to Mass DOT with the city to reconcile.
Which the state's paying
No,
half their project.
I'm not criticizing.
But it wasn't
It
like-
made sense in that
yeah.
circumstance, but it doesn't make sense for like.
But usually
mom and
it's the
pop.
petitioner that wants them.
Yeah, usually the petitioner wants more time,
It's not the
that's,
city.
Yeah.
They need more.
unless considered.
So then, and then the last one is, I still am confused about this 1228-010,
right?
the last page, the last section. I'm still not 100% understanding.
Page 5.
The easy way to explain it is ADUs will not be going for special permits. That section would allow them to go in seeking special permits. If you say it's allowed by right, that becomes a residential use that could potentially go in. So the idea was to separate the processes. Whether you do site plan review or by right or whatever, that it's not going to get mixed in with going for special permits.
So the 1228-010 is special permit process.
Largely, yeah. Then there's the exceptions for singles, twos, and threes, et cetera. But yeah, that part is directly towards that, the special permit part.
Okay, so that was my presentation. I mean, like I said, to Councilor Spatafora, very confusing. I've tried my best to summarize what Councilor Winslow was saying and some of the things that I learned from reading the regulations and watching the road.
Councilor McDonald was up next.
Yeah, just very quickly, two questions, and I'm generally supportive of this, Councilor Vaughn. I appreciate you integrating all these pieces. One is, so under the scenario where we would require a homeowner to get a variance, and I don't really like the idea that you would require a variance for existing building. I understand the logic that you're doing something that impacts your property, but it feels like that's going to be a hard one to make sense to people. You have to get a variance for an existing building. Well, holding that for a second, if I make an addition to my house and I want to, then current zoning kicks in, right? And the variance has to be based on current zoning, right? So I would be more okay with requiring a variance if it was just that you're not making anything worse, rather than by building an ADU, somehow you're then kicking in all other existing dimensional controls. As long as you get back to kind of where you were, that I can. I don't know about the requiring all new, like to build an ADU, then all new building codes and zoning kicks in, and you have to get a variance from all that. That seems excessive to me. So let me state that. My thought about the affordability provisions is if we take it down to the state minimum parking requirement, which is no parking within a half mile of a T station, correct? That's the state minimum
Or
requirement.
bus station, which is defined each bus route.
The whole city.
Are they clear that it's a whole bus route?
Yes, that is in
Right
the
now,
draft
okay.
guidelines, which haven't been finalized. Hopefully they will change that, but we won't know that before they change, they
All right. Well,
finalize that.
if it was just the T station, what I was gonna say is that could be an affordability incentive, because if the unit's affordable, you could not require the parking if it's outside that half mile buffer. I don't think, we may not know that when we have to make a decision.
Should we do
before
that
this,
anyway?
but-
I guess that's.
Well, it wouldn't have any impact, right? If it's not required regardless.
There's no
They
teeth.
change it.
There's no
then-
teeth, but I'm just trying to think, is there anything we can incentivize this that helps, it helps make it easier to build an ADU if it's an affordable,
Money.
affordable qualified. I understand we can give them money.
That's the only legal way you can do it.
But if we can't restrict the home occupants, owner occupancy, I don't know how you can use funds that require it to be owner occupied. If the ADU can't be required to be owner occupied, how can you do it?
No, so it's not through the zoning, it's through
I
the
understand what you're
condition of
saying.
the
If you
funds.
if we set up such
The
that
zoning
we
is-
can qualify for money through the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, then that can trigger other things.
Yeah, like for instance, or even historic preservation easement. Like if you want the Affordable Housing Trust Fund money to do this ADU burn, then you need to agree that it's gonna be owner occupied, it's gonna be affordable, and there's gonna be a deed restriction on that. If you don't want the money, if you don't want to do that, then you can't accept the money.
I don't know if you can legally say it's deed restricted owner occupied. That's been challenged in court. Everything else I agree with.
But plus the.
That's why Salem has 32, because it's owner occupied.
Then the ADU is there, and we can't say it can't be
Yeah.
owner occupied when the people leave, because it's against state law.
Yeah, you can't do that. That's why they put that in there, because
I
that's
think
what all
you
the
could
cities and
start
towns
We
did.
would have to buy it to deed restrict it,
Yeah.
and then we would be the owner that would sell it, and then that's how we could get the restricted.
To build the ADU cannot require it be owner occupied.
No, I think it says you could, for land,
All I know is that when you
use
usually.
of land shall not require owner occupancy. So it's not just creating it, it's the use of it.
It's something you have to look into, but I do know that usually, like, when you use the power of your purse and you're putting money into it, you can make more restrictions than if you're just doing it based on your.
What happened in Worcester?
Well, that,
It's not just the creation, it's the use.
I agree with you, I'm just saying, I don't see.
But I think what he's saying is, if you want us to pay for you to do this, we put strings on the money.
Correct, so the money, not on the unit.
Right.
And then if you don't do that, then you have to pay the money back. No one's gonna do that.
Okay, so we're just talking about, I mean, I think another thing we have to understand related to that, affordable housing trust, I mean, we only have, what, 50,000, 500,000. There's not a lot of money in there, so it's, you might be able to pay for the site plan review, but it's only a couple units worth of construction.
Very
So
good
it's
question. I never thought.
not gonna build a lot of affordable ADUs or whatever, so that's one of the limitations, it's not a lot of money we have to throw down, so. But not really gonna do it, so.
I have
Councilor Taylor.
a question, just, would these, so say I build an accessory dwelling unit outside of my house that I rent out, or I have my mother live in, whatnot, and then years, I'm not renting it out anymore. I now have, say, 3 units total. Can I turn those into condos? Can I turn an accessory dwelling unit into a condo and then sell it separately as I?
Yes,
Really?
nothing to stop you from doing it. Condoization is a legal form of ownership, the city's got nothing to do with it. And unfortunately, the term ADU is something made up by the EOHLC. There's no such thing as an ADU in the building code. So what you're creating is multifamily houses. If you have a single and you put an ADU on it, you've now created 2.
You caught
If you
it.
have two and you put a third unit, you're not creating a three-family house. Not an ADU, it's a three-family house.
Can you go in there with the intent to do that, build an ADU and turn it to condo? Of course.
What would be the?
You'd be crazy not to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what?
You'd be out of your mind.
You
So
can't
you
restrict
just build a duplex now here where you would otherwise build a single family.
No, you take your single family, you put your ADU on it, and then
But you could design
and
it
then
just
you
like-
legally condoize it and sell it. There's no ownership requirement, and there's no affordability requirement. That's why this whole thing is, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah, we'll see how it when they start selling.
You'd be out of your mind if you didn't do that.
That's a good
There
idea.
has to be a dwelling existing, there has to be an existing dwelling, right?
Yeah, to add an ADU, you have to have it.
So but actually, how does that apply with new construction?
Yeah.
So you have, I have a lot and I want to build a single family home with an ADU. What do I do?
You build a single family home.
With an ADU?
No.
You wait,
Oh, then you go for the ADU.
Yes, then you put the ADU in.
you design it to have the ADU, but you don't get it for a permit.
But that probably wouldn't make as much sense because you're only looking at 90 square feet for.
Kind of took the wind out of the sails, didn't it?
Well, those multi-family, that would be bigger.
So,
And the
It
original
dispels a lot of the
cost to
concerns
do
there.
it.
No one's gonna do
Start
so right now,
Because
it's 8:20.
Got it. Because
You
they're
had
ready with it.
kind of a round robin of a couple ideas. What's,
So I would like to present what I just shared with y'all at the public hearing, because I think it's only fair to the public that they get to vet this, because I plan on making these amendments. And so in that vein, I would like to take up some of these amendments here, now, as a committee report to the full council, which will have to codify and approve them. But I do want to take the temperature of the room. The changes that I've proposed in section 1 on page 1, are you generally in favor of separating attached and detached the way I presented it? Because I would move to amend the paper to reflect the changes in part 1.
I am in favor of that, but I'm really stuck on the lot size. I know we've come back to that a lot. I have a hard time supporting separating the detached versus the attached if I feel like we have this, it feels to me like an arbitrary square footage. I understand all the reasons that it's complex to calculate, and it sounds like that's not a reasonable ask on our staff. But I'm not seeing the logic of, it feels like we're devaluing a lot of people's property by taking the opportunity to do this away when it could be done very reasonably with all the other restrictions that we have. So I'm going to say that I would agree with the change you're proposing here, but I am really stuck on the lot size, and that would sort of be a trigger for me to.
so are
would
you
you like to
saying
take
that
vote first?
you want to talk about reducing the lot size first, or do you?
I'm not in favor of having a lot size. That's just where I'm at. I think
Just no lot
reducing
size.
it would be preferable to me, but my gut says that we have a lot of other protections in here on the dimensional controls, that the lot size is. That's just me. That's where I'm at. I feel like we've put a lot of other reasonable restrictions in place that can protect abutters and will not allow the cramming and the intensity of uses that we're envisioning. I agree with all the things people said. I don't want someone next to me double or tripling up their garage and putting it both the jacuzzi that I don't own yet that I fantasize about, like, you know. But really, these are the things that are going to impact people, even if they do have lots that are on the line. And all of what we're talking about isn't going to do anything to prevent the bad behaviors that we all agree are very likely to ensue.
So do we want to, does anybody second Councilor Mello's motion about separating?
Because I plan on going through all of the amendments, so we
Let's just do it one at a
The
time.
next
Yeah,
thing
so
is
let's
definitely.
do it section by section.
We're definitely going to talk about
So-
sections.
I would prefer to have the site plan review for all of them starting off and then eventually taking that off depending on what we see within like the next year. But I would be okay with dropping the square footage only because it doesn't seem like that's something that is really like in our control anyway. And if they can go for it with 3,000 square feet, over 7,000 square feet, and we can still review and make sure that everything like,
I agree with that.
I could make that adjustment, but I would rather have the more site control over what these projects are looking like. That would be my preference with this.
So I haven't heard a second to Councilor O'Malley's proposed amendment was section, well, his first, well, but I do hear
I would say
maybe
that.
Counselor
I
Taylor's,
will make a motion to take out the requirement for the
so in the table of
amount.
intents
As
and
long
uses,
as everything has site plan.
to drop the area square footage. So that, so we have a motion to drop the square footage from the table of intents and uses for ADUs by Counselor Taylor, seconded by
But
Counselor.
apply site plan review to everything,
But-
equally across. the
All
board.
right.
Hang on,
So-
can we be specific?
No, I'm just saying, what, we're gonna kind of take one thing, we haven't, no, we're not taking up his idea yet, so. So it's still, we haven't changed the other thing yet, so you can, so
Well,
this,
that, yeah.
so
that's-
it's just, so the,
So I am making a motion then to just, I guess, make it site plan review for everything.
okay, but that's what it is right now, so
No, it's, no,
we don't need to make an amendment.
it was not.
This is just
original
council
paper.
from the
Wait,
original,
but I'm confused. I
So-
thought it was separated. Am I wrong?
okay.
So in the original,
That's
that,
what
He's
she's
proposing,
proposing.
maybe-
That's his-
The amendments are to the
Nobody
original.
said
He,
they.
he,
this is
he
the
offers that
original
amendment, no one
site
seconded his
review on
amendment.
everything.
Yeah.
So-
Oh,
Second,
okay.
so
So
we
you
don't need to make
you
an
don't
amendment.
have, so, all
I
right,
didn't
so,
know what we were
so the
making.
first amendment is to Counselor
So
Taylor's
you're not
motion.
making an
I
amendment?
have that,
No, she,
Not yet.
I don't think so.
No.
I'm making a motion to approve it as it was stated originally
okay, so
in
you
the
don't need to
site
make
plan
an
review
amendment.
made by
So,
Michelle
so
Romero.
the process, Counselor O'Malley made a motion to amend
Councilor Lane, you're not gonna second my motion?
the
So
site
don't
plan,
hold off for her second.
and no one has seconded that. So we can go on to the next.
Peg, Takers over here, Peg?
I'm sorry.
No, come back to it.
Sorry, not on.
How you feeling?
Do you still feel the same?
Baby, so smooth along.
Does everyone still feel the same way about site plan review if there's no change to the footprint or height of the building?
I do, yes. I think it's important to see like that they're making changes.
Like, I don't plan to do this, but my house, you know, is like, you could put in an accessory dwelling unit inside the house and still comply with existing zoning. You would still
Then you're
want.
making it owners, this would make it.
Yeah, that's my question. Like, if you're not changing anything about the dimension, outside dimensions of the building, you still want a site plan review?
I would, yeah, just to make sure that their proposal going forward is gonna be,
I agree with what you're saying, but that's not the motion on the table.
Right.
yeah.
Well,
But
I can't make it.
I can't
It's not
either.
a minute, so I'm just asking.
Okay, all right,
First, second, yours.
So we have a motion by Counselor Taylor to amend the intensity of use, which is section 12.16.010 to eliminate the square footage, what is it? Amount, eliminate from 7,500, just eliminate it entirely. Second by Counselor Linehan. Any further discussion on that? All right, so do we want to, so let's take a
So
roll
that's
call.
going from 75 to 0.
Just
7,500 to 0.
Because if there's no requirement for it, if
Yeah.
it's, then it wouldn't,
The state says you have to consider it anyways.
yeah, if we have to consider it anyways, let's consider it anyways, so let's get it overall.
There isn't a minimum, sorry. All right, so.
Do we have to put a minimum?
It sounds like they can waive this site plan review.
No, I just don't want to say that.
It's just a reference, right,
Okay,
for the committee to use, who's announcing to use. So you're saying there'd be no reference, you don't want to give any guidance?
There'd be no guidance on the
Could
square
you,
footage.
could we just write guidance?
So he could just use the single family standard of 7,500 if he's doing it. There's no standard, he could use what he thinks is reasonable,
Well, okay.
right? But
Is
that's,
that what the
Zero,
intent
you want it to be
is?
zero.
Do it doesn't matter, he can still use whatever he wants.
So Counselor Taylor, zero, or is it just not having at all? Okay.
Because it can only go on where there's
So
a.
you're
dwelling.
saying because you couldn't go down to 3,000.
Right, just so that, I just don't want it to be a barrier for somebody to apply, if they see 7,500.
I agree.
If Nelson's looking at it and it's like 1,000 square feet and it's like a patio in the back and they want to build a palace, like, he's
They're not
gonna
gonna meet the
use
other
his judgment, right? But
That's
if
your job.
they just want to bump out a little bit, that might make sense and he can
So you
say,
basically say no minimum square foot.
yeah.
So the amendment is basically to say an area of square foot is no minimum.
I think you need a square footage though. Zero is awesome. right?
Oh, you do, yeah.
So we keep on referencing Nelson, but Nelson may not be here. We
Right.
sort of know how Nelson is now, but whoever is the zoning official, so that's what we have to keep in mind, not so much Nelson.
So Councilor McDonald.
Is there a way to indicate a standard for the site plan review to use, or the building inspector, that is not the square footage? Because I just think it's confusing. The table of intensity regulations implies a required minimum, and then you have to get a variance to define. And so I feel like it's confusing to that. Is there another place we could put 5,000 square feet or whatever the standard is that makes it clear that that is a useful yardstick, but it's not confusingly labeled as a limit that actually isn't?
It sounds like you're not.
No.
The Dover Amendment doesn't state that you can't set dimensional controls for protected uses. It just states that you handle it differently. So this is well-tested case law. Schools, religious facilities, daycares, agricultural facilities, telecommunication sites, you can have dimensional controls in your zone. You just can't deny somebody or make them go for a variance because they're not hitting one of those dimensional controls. So when it comes to reasonable regulations, that is what you're setting. You're setting reasonable regulations. And then the site plan review committee is deciding how close are you coming to those reasonable regulations, considering your site, your building, your use.
So, but could we notate that with an asterisk or somehow? Like, I just think this reads, I understand an architect probably knows. But is there a way to say that? That like, this is the standard we're using, that the site plan review will be using, and you should not be prohibited from applying for a permit because you don't meet those controls. That's adjudicated by the city.
So it sounds like 0 seems crazy because that's not guidance either.
I don't think 0 you can do.
If I could, you're not prohibited because you're gonna say by right or by site plan review. So you look at the first chart and say, is the use allowed? And it's allowed by right. So no one can't be prohibited from applying. If you put yes or you put site plan review.
Then it just looks like it doesn't make any sense. I mean, if you understand that this is a Dover Amendment qualified project, then yes, it will make sense. Otherwise, it will say, how can you require a minimum, but you can build it by right? Like, I want you to be able to look at it and understand what it means.
Then do we all feel comfortable with 5,000 and dropping down to 5,000? Does that seem like a comfortable? That was what being proposed.
So we want okay. So do we want it? So then, Councilor Taylor, you want to withdraw your initial motion and then go with 5,000?
I'm still more comfortable with that site plan, having site plan reviews, and then, so my motion right now is to drop it to the 5,000 as council now.
And it still could go below that.
And it still could go below that. It won't.
That's what's gonna happen.
You know, that's about half of the 6,000 units based on the research that I did.
Okay,
Of the 6,000 single families,
Okay,
there's
so-
about 3,000 single families that are around.
All right.
So 5,000.
All right, so we have a second of that. So she withdrew the initial thing to have it 0. Do we have a second of the 5,000 square feet? So Councilor O'Malley,
You're not the
second
committee.
that?
I second that.
All right, so any further discussion of having 5,000 square feet as?
Well, actually, hold on. I would like to do it for this entire section. Because whether or not I vote for this is depending on whether I vote for some of my other amendments. Now we get into the horse trading.
Well, okay.
Welcome
We
to
do-
2016. and all this
You don't have to second or but does anybody want to second just dealing with the 5,000 square feet right now? So does anybody? Okay. Do we have any second of the 5,000 square feet?
I would also be fine with making sure that when we post this publicly, we make sure that we explain that very clearly.
I would hand over the chair to second the
With this
5,000
FAQ
square feet.
section.
And we can horse trade, So,
I'll second it.
all right, so Councilor Linehan seconded having the area square footage be 5,000 square feet. Any further
My
discussion?
neighborhood is like under that. I don't know how I'm gonna go out back and answer my constituents with that.
Do you
number. It's
feel it
ridiculous.
could be?
But you
Well,
can still
I think
apply
it's
for the
just-
site plan review. You can still look at the site plan review.
I think it's coming down to how we explain it to people. I think Councilor McDonald is right.
I think that,
It's
yeah.
not at all clear, and I think a lot of people are gonna read this and be very upset with us.
I agree. Is there another way to indicate this besides just a number sitting in?
You're gonna need 1,000 square feet for your open space. You're gonna need 900 square feet for the building. 2,000 square feet?
Why do we care about
Why
open
don't you just
space?
put the,
Who cares at this
that
point?
I
calculation?
know what I do.
No, I think it's ridiculous. We
Okay,
care
let's-
about
let's,
open space. It's
okay.
the,
Do we want
I make a motion to zero.
Okay, we're talking about this motion right now, so we're gonna go to another proposal for 3,500.
I feel like I'm.
3,500 going once, going twice. All right, so it's down to 3,500, so we're gonna go,
Now we got it.
so 3,500,
What's that committee
going
do?
once, going twice, all right. Any,
Aye.
So Council Taylor, are you okay with that?
All right.
3,500?
That is my
so the
motion.
motion
And
now
then
is to,
seconded by Linehan.
Council Linehan, thank you for patience, so
What's
And-
should we all go around and say what
3,500.
our lot
Okay,
sizes
all right,
are?
so, okay, all right,
How did we
okay.
get to 3,500?
Okay, because
Right.
that's, so,
It's arbitrary, right?
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
what, is yours
All right, so the-
3,500?
Where's that?
any further discussion? Should we, let's
Not
take a
ready.
vote on the 3,500. I think we, all right.
Never mind.
All right, all in favor of 3,500, say yes.
Aye.
Yes.
No.
Any opposed? All right, so the
So 4 to 1.
offering that the square footage would be 3,500.
I move.
All right, so
I
then,
move to change side to add or existing per side, whichever is less.
do you want to just do all those?
Yeah, I will.
Existing, all right, so
So,
side.
But you're taking off.
Are we taking it from lesser to smaller, or are you not changing it?
yeah, so it says smaller, make it say smaller.
Okay.
I see.
And I guess the other question I have here is it, you're talking about the principal dwelling. That is the, is
Existing use.
so that's existing principal. It's the side of the principal unit, right? That's what we're talking, not an shed or accessory, right? So do we have to clarify that?
No, this is the accessory dwelling. These are the dimensional controls for the accessory dwelling.
So now, I'm saying if you're accessory dwelling, you could, the side would be 10 feet or what the existing
What's there now?
side for the principal. That's,
But are you separating detached and attached?
Well, that's.
I mean, that's a concern, right?
but I think we're saying that it's the principal. That to me, that's sort of,
But it would be unreasonable during the site plan review for someone to take a garage and say, I want to have a 2.5 story garage. That is like a tower,
Yeah.
like we're in like southern Italy. Like,
Hey.
kind of the examples I had on mind in drafting this is where it was the principal. People were just getting and doing an addition and getting and meeting the existing side yards of the principal. So that's really kind of what I'm saying is like, it wasn't someone's shed that they were adding onto, it was the principal building. And that was, they either meet the 10 feet or they conform to the, they don't increase the non-conformity of the principal building. That's kind of what. So I think that's the clarity that would help me, I think so. And it helped clarify that it's not.
well, so because we're requiring site plan review for everything, I feel like it kind of addresses a lot of the concerns for the detached, which add the most problems that we're talking about. So like if someone said they wanted to turn their garage into it's 1 foot off the property line. They wanted to turn their garage into a 2.5 story structure. I don't think the structure, I don't know how we would be able to do that. But I think that you could say that that's not reasonable. Bulk and height.
Right, so I'm just saying, but that if that garage was 10 feet off, then maybe that would.
Oh, yeah, I mean, then in that circumstance, it might be reasonable. If you have your neighbors come out and say, yeah, we're in support of this, we want to see a garage tower.
That's why you want to have the
But
standards in this.
I'm just trying-
Maybe you can look at
When,
something.
so I'm just trying to get clarification, when you say the side yard, 10 feet for existing per side, whichever is.
Which are both sides or side? Both sides?
Well, either one, just saying like this, is it the principal,
No,
are
it's
you, what is existing? So are you saying it
the
can?
structure that you're building on. Is that how you would interpret that?
I interpret that if you have an existing building and it's 5 feet from the property line, and you're gonna put an addition on it, your addition can be 5 feet from the property line.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what, So, I mean, do we think this is clear enough for that?
And you would also say if someone was doing that to their garage and the setback is 1 foot, it wouldn't be of the principal dwelling, it'd be of the garage.
The whole thing.
You don't get what I'm saying? Like, because, it makes sense when it's an attached, which is why I was wanting it to go through the streamlined permitting process, because those ones, I think, you are run of the mill, you see them all the time. It's the detached that really creates a lot of.
So I don't know if we have the support to separate it out. So if we don't, you made the motion to distinguish between dwelling, attached and unattached. No one seconded that motion.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So
the way I interpreted this is your side setback. If your house is 10 feet from the property line, and you want to do an ADU in your existing structure, you have to maintain the 10 feet. If, say, your house is 9 feet and you want to do an ADU, you'd be able to keep the 9 feet if you're doing an addition or going up or in the basement. Now, the question is if you're doing it in your garage, if the garage is 10 feet from the property line, then you're good. If the garage is 1 foot from the property line, so that's good.
And so the distinction is the garage is not the principal unit. It's already a attached. It's what
But you would make
Yeah, but this doesn't say that.
So yeah.
But the only time I reference principal dwelling is for the height. Everything else, I believe, is based on applying it to the accessory dwelling.
The way this is written is the use of accessory dwelling unit, any all, but if you have a garage that's sitting on the property line, both property lines, your rear yard and your side yard property line, that's the lesser of, obviously it's the lesser,
Yep.
right? It can stay there.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's no, so that means essentially there's no rules for garages.
Well, no, you'd have to go to site plan review.
Well, but I mean, as far as turning that thing into a dwelling unit, it can remain
It could be a
on the property line with no issue. And matter of fact, if you want to extend it along the back of the property, you can extend it along the property line. Because you're extending the existing setback of
That would go over
zero.
well. That would go
How
over
is
well.
that
That's a bad
okay?
deal.
That's gonna go over well.
But that's only if it's reasonable. Like it could be determined not
Well,
reasonable.
it's 5 feet
Well,
reasonable.
that's why that's why personally, I would rather restrict detached and streamline. I wanted to make it as difficult as possible without violating the law for people to do detached, because that's where you're gonna come into these issues. And I wanted to encourage people to do attached ADUs.
So when you say attached, what if somebody would rip my roof off?
Yeah, you'd be allowed to do that.
But that's, you also made, I mean, again, I don't think it's just that easy to say, go as high as you want to some degree.
Well, that's what they did on Salem Street. They did that old law office next to the fire station. They ripped the roof off and they turned it into a mansard. It looks a lot better now than it did before.
We went through a special permit process, with all kinds of, review and input from neighbors.
But I'm saying, I'm referring it to it because sometimes when you rip the roofs
So
off.
you're saying streamline, no site plan review.
No,
So like you were talking about earlier, like windows looking at somebody's yard, you have no control, build it, and they're gonna do anything. Nothing.
for the attached.
So I guess, should the relief or whatever it should be attached, should it be required to be an attached? Should the side yard be 10 feet or you get relief if it's attached to? So it's not increasing, it's not for the principal. I mean, again, that was my intent when I wrote mine, was that it's really, that it applied to, if you're just building straight back and you're still keeping your backyard, if you have an 8 foot you're non-conforming now and you're just building back an addition that's still 8 feet from the side yard, that should be something that would be readily.
So you wanted to say side, you want side to say 10 feet or existing per side, whichever is lesser for attached ADUs. For attached.
It's the side of the existing, is the principal dwelling, not the accessory dwelling. I guess that's the.
What's the difference?
That's
Your proposal is separated the uses in the use table.
No, but I don't have the votes. No one's seconding my motion.
So we haven't separated, so everything's going through site plan review right now. Right?
But if you want different standards for attached and attached, you should set different standards.
Right.
If that's what you're
Just
saying.
need two
Yeah,
definitions.
who's ever gonna interpret this will have two sets of standards depending on what the project is.
because of the
Okay.
motion that failed.
This actually makes it easier for you, for the garages, for the attached, I mean, the
Right.
non-attached. This makes it easier.
So you should say,
Section 2, the second part.
All of your dimensional controls, where it's, the caveat is a number or lesser, that makes it easier.
Right.
Basically, everybody's lesser.
Which again, I'm
Like
okay
the
with
number
my,
of-
I'm okay with my neighbor turning their garage into an ADU. What I'm not okay with is them turning it into an ADU tower or having the windows.
Doesn't matter, you can't say that, because they can add up.
But that's what I thought the site plan review process is for.
so say that if your neighbor was just extending their house, the principal, maybe they have a shed, but they're not doing anything to the shed. They have an accessory thing that's next to the fence. But their ADU addition to the principal dwelling is not varying from that 8-foot setback. That would be okay without having to go site plan review, right? But if they decide to do their shed, you want that to go, so that's why I say you have to refer to the principal
That's how
dwelling.
I wrote it. That's why I divided it, because if you're gonna turn your shed.
But that's
into-
assuming, yeah,
But
so
we didn't do that.
we didn't do
I'll
that.
make that motion. I'm gonna change my mind so
All
that
right.
we can move forward on this.
All right, so we're gonna treat detached units.
To treat attached and, oh my God, I literally losing my words.
So-
To treat attached and detached, as the way that Councilor O'Malley has laid it out in this proposal.
So the first, so it's section 12.12.030. So, Councilor,
Can I just say one thing before you guys go? Can I say one thing?
okay,
I want to ask another question. I have a 2-family, I want to add a 3rd unit on the 3rd floor. You're going to require me to require 2 sets of map egresses, right?
Depends.
On what?
If you're sprinkling the 3rd unit,
Not sprinkling.
but yes, you are, you have to.
Okay.
So you're gonna sprinkle the 3rd unit. It depends on if they have a common path of egress or not.
They have a common path. So
So you could have one.
if they don't have a common path, you're going to make me put in porches in the back or fire escapes in the back.
Not fire escapes, but yeah.
Porches.
Exterior means. to be-
And you guys don't want anybody, and you want it to streamline through, adding decks in the back of somebody's house. You're not just adding a unit, that's what I think everybody
Does the
understands.
deck have to comply with the setback? The deck does the deck go beyond the setback? Or is the deck have to be within the setback?
Great question, I don't know.
Does not having to go through a site plan review still means it goes through?
He still has to. review
Yeah,
it.
so
but if
Still-
they're,
It can't get permits,
Can't
it can't violate the
Right.
health code of the building.
So I second Counselor.
okay, so Councilor McDonald? and then-
Yeah, I'm not on committee, but I actually think the happy medium here, and I know this is more complicated, but would be to have something that qualifies as semi-attached, like a certain amount of change. I don't think is a big deal, but if you're changing more than, I don't know, 25% of the height, or, 25% or 50% of the footprint or something, then I think you may want a site plan review. So anyways, that would be my opinion, is try to find some threshold by which an attachment is large enough that you really do want some negotiating power.
That would be the square
Attached.
footage or something like that, you could.
Yeah, relative to the size, because I don't think you need a site plan review, which is about dimensional controls, if it's inside an existing structure or minor modifications to an existing structure. But if you're gonna double the size of your 900 square foot house, you're gonna add a whole story, you may want to talk about that. That's all.
So you could say, right now an ADU could be up to 9,000. You could say if it's above 450, that would be something that would require a site plan review.
I just think it's relative to the building, like what you're changing to an existing building.
Okay, Councilor
I have a
Cronin.
question. So if you are looking to do attached and detached, then even section 2 doesn't say which one this is applying to. I mean, like, so again, then you still have, as Nelson kind of said, I think, but the detached makes it easier for someone that is a foot off of their garage off the property line and they want to build above it. But so it doesn't say that it's be the 10 feet or the existing for or attached. It just says it's.
We could write for attached.
Right, so,
Now you
Yeah,
can amend
for
it, it's
attached.
different.
Yeah.
so, I mean, you could have ADU and you could have attached and detached. You could have that table of potential uses defined as different.
There's a motion that's been seconded.
Okay. So this would be separating site plan review. So requiring site plan review for any detached, and then not necessarily requiring it for attached. But so is that's the initial thing. So that any more discussion? Do we want to? If it's
I just want to say that on the record, but you know, it's
all right. Right, so you can make that further amendment.
I may choose to make that.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna just take this straight, having a different standard for site plan review. If it's detached, it will have site plan review. If not, it will be by right. So, everybody understand that? So, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So
No.
we made that. So one no. Okay, right. So no. All right. So maybe we do we want to?
So 3-2, we had Crow and Taylor,
Right.
is that correct? Thank you.
Okay. And then Councilor McDonald, do you want to qualify that to say accessory dwelling units that are attached, if it's more than 50%?
Well, I can't really make a motion because I'm not on the.
Okay, well, just.
I was just curious, are there other thresholds that like this that already exist in code? Like, isn't demolition at 25, doesn't the percentage of structure counts as demolition permit? Are there other thresholds relative to the size of additions, attachments that exist in the code?
No.
We're just picking
The only place the building code contemplates the existing building is through what's called the existing building code. And we're
It's aptly named.
with certain, it's the certain percentage of the building that you're working on dictates which specific codes you need to comply with. You wouldn't want to follow that for this.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just trying to think, so if it's a 2-story building, add another story, that's gonna be 50% change in height, roughly, it's the same. If it's a 3-floor building and you were adding a 4th floor, that would be roughly 33. So I would say if you're changing more than 25% in height or more than 25%, 50%, something like that of the footprint of the building, then you would also need a site plan.
I would be willing to discuss this with you offline.
Sure.
Our brains and we'll try.
That's
figure
fair.
it out.
We can, we don't have to do it, but so that's something maybe for further thought.
Can I just ask one more thing?
Okay.
I'm sorry. All right. Could we add a note? I drafted this note while you're sitting here and tell me something like this. The Massachusetts law, citation, requires municipalities to consider all applications for accessory dwelling units regardless of their proposed dimensions. Site plan review process defined, wherever we say it's defined, shall use the dimensions listed here as standards for evaluating and setting conditions for ADU applications received. Could we say something like that with some asterisks on the table? Is that accurate?
Yeah, we'll leave it out.
You're saying put a reference to the state law
Yes.
in the.
But yeah, anything you want. I mean, it's important to note that we explain our zoning to people every single day.
I am trying to.
Our zoning is not obvious, it's not simple, it's not.
Nobody knows. Nobody.
You don't learn it, well, not, but I'm just saying, you don't learn it in high school, right? So explaining this is no different than explaining anything else. And we can certainly put something out there, informational, especially, come February 2nd on the ISD page or the city website.
I am just mindful that people will not know what they're looking at. This is a high profile issue, and anything we can do to indicate what is actually required so that is transparent from you. The moment you look at it will improve our residents' ability to successfully engage with this law. That is my point.
There's also some great examples of other towns that have made like president guides that we probably.
Yes, there's some really good ones.
Totally could and not have to reinvent the wheels.
Well, I will hold off on that.
Okay.
amendment.
So we've done 2 amendments. First one about 3,500 for the square foot. We've done a second one proposed to distinguish between attached and detached units in terms of site plan review. We have not done anything in terms of that percentage. Is there anything other, Councilor O'Malley, you think is more urgent?
Yeah, it's just these side setbacks, rear setback, you have to amend the principal building coverage, because that needs to be brought up to the 30%.
All right, so that was something that, all right.
That was
kind of a typo. Amendment number 3 would be amending, so this is, so the coverage of principal building was very clear, it's not 10, that's 30%.
Councilor, what I'm trying to figure out is your concern about the side and rear setbacks related to detached. Are you saying
No.
that?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah.
So you're saying that if someone has a garage that is 2 feet from the property line, they should not be allowed to do anything?
No, I mean, I think I'm fine if it goes to site plan review. I mean,
Okay, so that's happening. So does it make sense then to take up the amendment for the rest of the amendments for the table of intensity regulations, which is 10 feet or existing side, whichever is smaller?
I guess we can, I mean.
So I would move to amend the paper recommendation.
Should we define it as whichever is smaller for
For detached.
for existing structure?
For the existing structure in which the ADU is proposed? That sounds kind of right.
Yeah,
Whatever the house is in a square.
so. I mean.
You go to the lesser one or you go to the higher one?
I don't know how.
So lesser. Right, so you go to the lesser one. So if one is 6 feet back from the property line and one is 4, you go to the 4.
4 is the lesser.
Whichever is this one, yes. It's in there.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess
You wanna clarify
if you
the-
have a garage and you're going through it, that would be if the ADU is being integrated into the garage, then the garage setbacks.
So you
But
want to say,
if you're building a separate ADU from the garage, or you're at, I mean, I guess it's like you only get the relief if it's being attached to something.
so you actually bring up a good point,
Yeah.
because what we might want to put is a date. That for detached, it only applies for detached accessory uses that are currently in existence as of the date of the enactment of this ordinance. Because the way people could get around this is they put a shed in.
Then
They could put a shed in now, or after we enact this, leave it there for a couple of years, and then say, I'm turning that into an ADU, and now they have a closer setback. When for the new construction, it really should have been farther back. Nelson, you know what I'm saying? Because right now, you can put a shed pretty close to the, like 3 feet, 4 feet.
It's temporary structure.
It should be 3 feet if it's a certain size. Yeah.
So
Temporary structure, right? A shed?
Accessory structure.
That can be converted?
so now you can.
Well, I know people are gonna get, yeah, trust me.
Nobody's
So,
gonna do
I think
this,
the
don't
bigger
worry,
concern
no one's
is-
even gonna do this.
You don't think
I
so?
think
No one's even gonna pry into this now.
the bigger,
Really?
the bigger concern is if you have
You don't think anyone's gonna build
you have an
anything?
existing garage and it's in the corner of your lot, right? And it's on the side yard line, it's on the backyard line, and you have the rule that say lesser, lesser, lesser.
Yep.
And your lot's 50 feet wide, someone could take that garage and extend it across the
The
entire
entire
50
length.
feet of the backyard on the property line, all the way to the property line on the other side, and make it 18 feet deep.
Should I say,
Call it an ADU, and now you get a building across the entire back.
should I say no less than, but under no circumstances, no less than 3 feet?
Bigger numbers.
Yeah.
Or you could hold it to single-family standards.
Exactly, the 10 feet. Let them get
The
variance.
criteria.
Let them
that
get a
we would
variance.
have for a single family. If
Yeah,
you
so
wanted
that's
to build
kind of what.
a dwelling on a lot, you would have certain setbacks. I don't,
Yeah.
I'm missing
The
this,
the
why,
problem is that none of our parcels in the city comply with the single family.
I don't
But-
think that's correct.
But like I
don't
said,
think
I'm trying to
that's
say that it should
I
be,
have seen nothing.
that's why you say tie it to the principal use. Like I see, and that's the experience I've seen is that if you tie it to the principal use, the principal uses have some setbacks. So that's the type of thing that there are, if you tie,
The principal use. You
The
want to say the
principal
principal
use.
use. Okay.
that is, that if it gets tied to the principal use, then
Or
there's
the
some
principal
judgment
use.
that garage thing maybe, I don't think it happened because they,
Yeah, that's an outcome I don't want.
yeah.
Okay, so it's just, I'm hearing that you want to say for side, both sides in rear setbacks.
Right.
The 10 feet or existing per side, whichever is smaller, from,
First, 10 feet or
Of the
existing side setback for principal use.
for the principal, of the principal structure.
Principal structure.
So 10 feet or existing per side, whichever is smaller, as measured by the principal use.
Principal structure, is that, how would you?
How does that address what Nelson?
You get what, we get what we're trying to say. We're trying to,
It's principal structure is what you want to call
Principal structure. So that's kind of what I'm trying to
it.
get
That's
at.
worded weird.
That's what I'm trying to get at, is that generally the setbacks apply to the principal structure, right? It's not the accessory structure.
Well, we have setbacks for both.
Right, so what we really want to do is to say if there was a
Right, you want to mimic the setbacks,
of the
no
principal
lesser than
structure.
what the principal structure.
Right,
already is.
right. So 10 feet or mimic the setbacks
Or
of
the,
the
or
principal
the,
structure.
or the lesser of the principal structure.
Right, yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so how do we say it?
10 feet or the lesser of the principal structure.
The logic being that nothing's coming closer to than it is right now. In theory, if you have a house and it's 4 feet, then it's just gonna
You're
stay
gonna
the
get
same.
an A for this.
I don't think we're getting a name, but maybe a C plus.
So,
The problem you're gonna run into with that in particular is the rear yard setback.
So it's 10 feet or
Lesser of the principal structure.
the lesser of the principal structure. That's my motion. for-
and we're, and the
For side.
rear, I mean, we didn't do that same existing,
But you can't,
right?
because then you never had anything.
Right, so,
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
yeah, so, yeah.
So you have to come up with something for the rear.
Okay,
So that's my,
For
motion.
side and both side setbacks.
Correct, to add the language or what Nelson said.
And we're not changing the frontage or the front. All right, so,
10
so
feet
on
is
that,
very small.
so the motion to have the side and both side setbacks be 10 or 20 feet from, or the lesser of the setback of the principal.
So can I ask a question? If the garage is in the sidewalk, you can't turn that to an ADU?
You know, you can.
No,
You have to go to site plan review.
there's Ward
You
3
can.
residents with a side where you park underneath.
No, you can. You go through site plan review and he has to determine whether or not that's reasonable.
Because there's no frontage. There's no setbacks. It's literally the sidewalk.
Yeah,
So you can go through site plan
There's no
review.
front yard setback.
that's your house.
Huh?
So, yeah.
There's no front yard setback.
Yeah.
That's
Or
front.
you go to,
Yeah,
you
mine-
could still,
that's how mine is.
yeah, so you could go to site plan review with that.
Go to site plan review everything.
Yeah, so that's, right.
Well, I don't want to screw that guy who's got a garage built in the house. I mean, he's got no options.
So do we have a second for that Councilor Malley's
I'll second
change?
that.
All right, second by Councilor Linehan. So any further discussion?
So that was,
Okay.
that was, oh, so
So
I,
this is
But
on
that doesn't include
this
the
table, so it's the
back.
side and setbacks will be
Yeah,
10 feet
right,
or,
but, well, a couple things, I get it. On this side, it will say 10 feet, or we decided to change the word lesser to smaller because that goes with the state law.
No, this you can use less.
Okay, so we can say lesser. Lesser of the principal structure, and then under both sides, it's gonna say 20 feet, or taking out the word existing,
or the setback. of the
20
principal.
feet. or the lesser of the principal structure. So we're taking out all of this wording
Yes.
right here.
All
And we're
right.
just making it say that, we're taking out existing per side.
Yeah.
Are we keeping in per side under side? And taking out per side under both sides?
I hate to do this, I think that's actually worded incorrectly.
Okay, all right, okay.
Like the side yard, I think it should be 10 feet or match the existing structure, whichever is lesser.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good, so,
Yeah, that's my intent.
yeah, all right, yeah.
So because my intent is if you have a
Give a
setback,
side yard.
if you have like an 8-foot side yard setback and you want to put an addition on the back, you can continue that wall. So it doesn't, right, that's
Yeah,
what we're having.
yeah.
You would say same instead of
Good.
match.
What?
Same instead of
Same,
match.
yeah, you can say
Or 10 feet or same.
As the existing structure.
All right, so we're
Or
using,
less.
what? Okay, all right, so that's 10 foot, so what's,
I just
Council?
have a question. So these rules aren't set in stone yet.
Yeah.
We create this and say like February 15th, the state comes back and says, oh, sure, you can say that it has to be affordable. Can we change it?
Yeah.
At that point, if they make a change? Okay.
It won't apply to anyone who applied between the 2nd and the 15th, but it would apply to anyone who applied after.
They're not approving our guidelines, we're just gonna have to watch for what else they issue and then adjust accordingly. It's not like 3 days.
All right, so we,
Like, we couldn't make them more strict.
all right, so we have Councilor O'Malley's motion with the language Nelson just suggested about.
I really want to read this
Okay,
back.
I'm gonna read it back.
So under where it says side, we're striking everything that's written in red. And it's going to say 10 feet or to match the existing structure, whichever is lesser. I'm sorry, take it off the word or here.
Same, I think they changed it 10 feet.
No, it's
or
not existing,
same
the
as
principal
existing.
He
Right.
just said existing structure.
You want to
He
see
changed
principle, right?
Yeah, you
Oh,
changed it to
principal.
same
Principal.
instead of match.
Same as existing principal structure.
Just-
Or whatever, less than the
Or
structure,
less.
or whatever is less.
Throw me curve.
So, and then full size is 20 feet.
Again, under both sides, we're scratching everything that's in red.
Yeah.
And it's gonna say 20 feet. Or the same as the existing principal structure, whichever is lesser.
Yes, good, all right, thank you. So everybody understand that?
Does it make sense to do it for the rear too?
No, I think let's not talk about the rear. We have, all right, all those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye, all those, any opposed? All right, so that matters. Do we want to talk about the rear? What was it proposed by, Michelle, was it proposed to be 20 feet for rear?
It was, these
Is
are
that-
all the single family standards. That's what
Okay,
was
so-
proposed.
So I didn't,
So I proposed 15 because it allows space for like a driveway or like parking.
Or fire truck.
Or.
but, well, that's rear.
But this is between the structure and the rear property line, so I don't think anybody's getting back there.
But I'm just saying access, there was a
So
safe.
that's where I got the 15 number from. It's like it applies to our parking widths for parking spaces. And I was also gonna say whichever is lesser. So if you have a parcel that you might have a lot of side space, but you might be very close to the back. This would allow you to expand your structure towards the side setback at the same width. It's just doing the same thing on the side as in the back.
Does this include stairs, to Council Mallory's point? Like if you added up on that pre-existing, if I built on top of the garage and the staircase now is 2 feet from the property line, where do the standards go for the, like, access?
On setbacks and measures to stairs and.
Okay.
So if there
That's
was
good.
a deck, it would be measured to the
That's
deck, the end of the
Yes.
porch.
No, I'm saying if you added on the garage,
Right.
the staircase to say to get out upstairs would have to be,
Well, with the 3-family though, too, with a deck.
The same idea.
Like that would be the same idea.
Yeah, so I just, focus on the rear, so is the rear, I mean, is that sort of related to open space? Is that, I mean, why do we have rear setbacks really? Is that to have some open space? Is that kind of what the concept?
Well, it really depends on the neighborhood.
So there's 2 property lines like this, and you don't have 15 to 20 feet here, and you don't have it here, and you have the houses on top of each other,
Right.
which is a massive,
Right, noise and.
well, fire, like,
Fire and,
you
yeah.
know, is gonna spread.
You
Well,
have
you couldn't do a
requirements that
porch
open
or something
space
like that.
be located in your yard areas. That's what it's for, the yard areas.
Right, to have some
Parking,
setback.
open space. Yeah.
So is
But
there?
I'll give you an example, like in some parts of Ward 4, the front yards are much larger than the backyards. And there are often no backyards. So I think in some places, like in Ward 6, you often have small front yards and large backyards.
So the intent here to have, what you're really saying that it would be like 20 or 15 feet, or the lesser, I mean, if you were just, let's say you had a sun porch and you could build something on top of that, you could do that, but you wouldn't push 10, wouldn't push back. I guess that's the.
I'm okay with leaving it at 20. I think that whichever is lesser is probably helpful, but.
I'm just reflecting on this. In most situations, I think the best, if you're building a separate structure, you would want that to be as far away from the principal structure as possible. You may not want windows on the back, but I could imagine a lot of scenarios where your ADU backed up against the property line just fine. And lots of Malton properties back up against nothing, ledges, right? And so what's the value? Doesn't it just make the open space harder to manage if you got to put a strip of it behind the unit? Putting them in the corner of or the back of a property lot is probably going to make sense going to make the most sense of. So I know site plan review can do this, but I'm just saying, I don't know why we have it. I understand it was distance to another building in another property.
They're gonna have to survey.
So
They're
that-
gonna have to survey, right? They're gonna have to get a professional survey to make sure
Yeah,
that
site
it's not.
setbacks exist for a lot of reasons. One is so you don't have two buildings, because if you can put yours all the way back, your neighbor, but there's all the way back. Right?
Well, I would be fine with a required distance to another structure.
But then who gets that distance?
For their
So,
purpose.
yeah.
I mean,
But you also have setbacks so that you can maintain your property, so you can walk around it, you can paint it, you don't have to go on your neighbor's
Well,
property.
don't forget people like open space too, right?
Right.
I'm not suggesting less open
We
space.
still require the open space. So that's right on the 15. The 15 I thought was snow storage, parking.
Yeah.
That's how I got the 15. Snow storage, parking, you can still plant trees.
If it's harder for us to put a pool in somebody's backyard than a house, there's a serious problem with us. Seriously, you need 6 feet on a pool. You want to be able to put somebody's, I mean.
No, I'm saying 15.
No, I know, I'm just like, the idea of putting it up in somebody's backyard and then whoever wins first, you're talking about fairness.
No.
You know who's gonna win? The guy with the most money is gonna win, because they're gonna build it up there, and then you're gonna come over and say, well, I can't build it now because now it's 15 feet. How is that fair?
No, I mean, there's a lot that's not fair about it.
No.
I get it, but the idea of having a standard saying 15 feet, if you're gonna get a variance, you get a variance. I mean, you're gonna get a variance for a pool, you're gonna get a variance for a shed, decks. We do this all the time. And what's a variance cost, a couple $100?
But we're gonna get to that, where you don't think you should have to go for a variance. That's already been discussed.
So I would move that the rear yard setback be changed from 20 to 15 feet, or the language about the principal structure being lesser.
Or same as existing principal structure, whichever is lesser.
But the setback in the rear is already enough to put a house. So you would never have, the principal structure would never.
The yard was off
Be
to the
left.
side. The yard was
No,
off to
so
the side.
if you have like one of my other neighbors has no backyard, but they have a large side yard. If they want to expand into the side yard and keep their existing rear setback, which is less than 20 feet for sure, it might be 6. I'm saying they can expand horizontally along the rear at their existing setback.
Okay,
It's the same thing we did with the side. It's just now to the rear.
okay.
So they could do a side, I mean, if they had 15 feet on the side, then they could, or if they had 25 feet on the side, they could add to that side of the building. To the back.
But again, it also has to do with, as Councilor Spatafora said, the stairs. This also enables some stairs.
Well, if you're gonna have a second, you're gonna add on. Right, so
It
you're gonna
might
have
not be,
2 floors, right, because you're gonna have the 900 square feet, you need 2 floors, right, 450.
yeah.
I'll
Stairs
second
stairs
it.
can be internal.
All right, so it's gonna be 15 feet for the lesser of the principal.
Or the same as the existing principal structure, whichever is less.
That's my motion.
Okay, so that's second by Councilor Linehan. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye, so that says.
And I'm moving to amend the principal structure, striking 10 and going to 30%, which is a requirement of the single family zone, or whichever is greater.
I'll second
All right, second by, motion by Councilor O'Malley, second by Councilor Linehan. Any discussion of that? I think this was just a correction anyway, right, Michelle? That was the
The
10%.
30% was a correction, but to say whichever is greater is eliminating the coverage requirement. So if your house covers 90% of the lot, which in many cases, you know, the building takes up the whole lot, you're saying that's fine?
Well, so this really, I actually wonder if we can even cover the principal structure in our zoning, because it kind of gets to Council Linehan's point. What the accessory dwelling unit is what we're analyzing, but here we're talking about the principal structure coverage. I don't think it's permissible, to be honest with you, which is why I'm saying whichever the existing.
But we can regulate bulk, so bulk would be something like lot coverage, and in the guidelines, it specifically says
You can,
lot coverage.
of the accessory dwelling. unit.
Right, so if it's
But-
being added on to the principal, how are you gonna calculate it?
Well, because like, for instance, let's say you're not expanding the lot coverage. Let's say it's at 90%, you want to do an ADU in the basement or the attic. If you're saying it needs to be 30%, but it's 90%, you're requiring them to go get a variance for their lot coverage.
Not if it's in the building though, because you're not
I agree.
changing.
I'm thinking about an addition.
No, but we're not talking about an addition.
Why, you're talking about accessory?
There's no
dwelling?
setbacks.
Well, no, because it can't be, I'm saying whichever is greater, so if this is the existing. It's never gonna get bigger. It's never gonna get bigger than 30 unless it's already bigger than 30. And if it's already bigger than 30,
If you're just reconfiguring an existing structure, you're not affecting you're not going for a variance.
but here,
You're not making it any less non-conforming.
In the building coverage would still be 30, but if you're adding on to it, why would you not want it to still be 30? If it's 30 for the principal dwelling anyway, what are you suggesting?
I basically just saying that if you have a lot size and the principal dwelling is covering 30%, then it can stay there at 30%. If it's 40%, it should be able to stay at 40%. Right?
It can.
So you're saying internal or external? I'm confused.
External, like the whole building on the lot size.
But isn't, you're basically saying there's another provision in the zoning that lets you reconfigure inside the footprint without having to go through zoning, right?
If you're not changing the footprint or the outside envelope of the building, if you're just working with inside an existing building, you're not creating any new nonconformities. So you wouldn't be getting a variance for anything.
Well, no, because we have this other provision here that says if the establishment of an accessory dwelling unit, this is about page 2, 4 general. Now, D, if the establishment of an accessory dwelling unit creates a violation of dimensional controls or parking requirements for the principal dwelling, the violation shall require a variance. So it's just B.
So if you're staying within the existing structure, how are you creating a violation of dimensional controls or parking? You're not.
Oh,
So you have to expand outside the building to violate a dimensional control. You'd have to get rid of a parking spot to violate parking. If you're doing neither of those things, you just have one of these big houses in Ward 4, and you want to turn it from a 1 to a 2, you can do that inside the existing structure of the house. Have at it. You're not violating anything, because you're not making, even if it's non-conforming, you're not making it any less non-conforming.
You need something in here in case you're adding on to the house. You need a principal coverage requirement. So
Well,
you're saying you don't think we should have this, I think we should.
30%, but not whatever's
Well,
greater.
that's where it gets confusing, because, okay, say you have a house that covers 30%, or say it covers 40%. The principal structure, you now are adding an accessory dwelling that adds an addition. Any of the addition that you're using for the accessory dwelling unit doesn't count towards the principal building coverage, right?
Ryan, are you saying like if you had a carriage house, it was 1,200 square feet and it was bigger than, it was 40% of the lot, could you convert it to an ADU?
But it's already pre-existing, doesn't matter.
I think,
Is that the scenario you're
Yes,
asking?
I don't know why we need to talk about the coverage of the principal building, because it's irrelevant to the accessory dwelling. I think we're only supposed to be doing 30% for the accessory dwelling. I think talking about the coverage of the principal building is irrelevant. If it's 90%, you can still do ADU.
Oh, I thought that was 30% of the floor, like of the building.
No, it's 30% of the lot.
It's how much lot you want to cover so that you have enough lot to provide open space, parking, setbacks.
It's very.
So if you have 1,000 square foot lot, and you got a house on it that's half, so it's 500 square feet. And you're gonna add an ADU that's 200 square feet, right? So that's 700 square feet. So there's 300 square feet left over for everything
That's
else,
70% lot.
right? That's 70% lot coverage. My question though is, again, not to be technical, but at this point, who cares? You're gonna violate your open space, right? So then what do? You gotta get a variance.
No, you're gonna get relief from the.
So I think we've got two things going on here, and I think Ryan makes a good point that if you have an existing building, and let's say it's currently violating the lot coverage.
Yep.
You're gonna put an addition on it. That addition is your ADU. You cannot hold that addition. You could not send that addition for a variance. I'm sorry. You could not send the principal structure for a variance for that violation because principal structure is not violating the ADU.
The ADU.
You can't send the ADU for a variance. But having that number in the table is what the site plan review committee gets to look at as a reasonable regulation, and they get to use in their judgment of, are you doing everything you can to make this, to the spirit of our zone?
Well, and I think it also helps, like with Chris Simonelli's concern, like if you have places that are 80 or 90% coverage, is it reasonable to add ADUs there, right? That's
That
a
are
little bit.
internal.
Right. What?
That are internal.
That, yeah, I mean,
So the number there is a gauge. It's
Right.
Something,
Right.
as a reasonable regulation. to be used, but
External
not something
ADUs,
you would send
right.
someone for a variance for if the addition was the ADU.
right.
So
So
I'm
that,
okay with leaving it because I realize that if it's a pre-existing structure, it looks like it doesn't go through the process. You don't need to rip down half your house to make it compliant. That's what I was trying to, because we have had situations where we've required buildings to be like shrubs.
right, yeah.
So I was trying to avoid a circumstance where it was going to involve people destroying part of their houses to make their principal use less of coverage. But it sounds like it's more the coverage of the accessory dwelling.
So no change on coverage.
So is it 10% or 30%?
But we have to do,
30%.
and it needs to be 30%, so. Councilor Miller makes it.
I would move to change coverage of principal and thirty.
To 30%.
I didn't hear what you said.
I move to amend by striking 10% under coverage of principal building and inserting 30%.
Yeah, I'll
So we're taking out existing, whichever is greater. And you're doing that for both columns.
No, just for coverage of principal building.
I'll just do principal at this point.
So this is just, because right now it says 10%, but Michelle had submitted, that was a kind of clerical error, right?
Yes, it was.
So we have to make this amendment anyway. So this is just making sure what's suggested here, 30% for coverage of principal buildings. So seconded by Councilor Linehan. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? And now is coverage for accessory building, was that 10%?
So my understanding is if the way you treat a single family home is it can cover 30% of your lot, then you're required to treat the accessory use the same, at least the same. It could be more lenient, which I think that the accessory dwelling unit can then also cover 30%.
Accessory building is different from accessory use.
So, you're saying whether or not the ADU has a shed versus if the principal structure has a shed?
Nelson, do you want to?
Well, I mean-
We talked about this.
For starters, the accessory building has a limitation already.
Of the 900.
That you're going to hit probably before you hit the 30%.
So this is coverage of an accessory building that is not an ADU.
No, I think
So
if it's
900
used,
would be, 5,000, well, 3,500 would be.
I thought it was going to be used as the ADU. It's not what we talked about. That's why we wanted to put this footnote in.
What's the question?
Oh, let's see, yeah, the number.
So the ADU, what we had proposed
ADUs
could
going
be
in
more
the
than.
accessory, the ADUs going in the accessory building, that's what this coverage number was.
Right, so like if it's a 3,500 square foot lot, the ADU can only be 350 feet. That's basically the way you read it, Michelle, right?
No, it says, provided coverage for accessory building shall be no greater than 900 square feet. You had the
Yeah,
footnote.
it's like a little. Sort of an
So the-
asterisk, it's a number sign.
Yeah, so I think that's, I guess that's what I was saying. Your limitations most likely going to be 900 feet. It's not, it can't get bigger than 900 square feet.
Well, and that's why I wonder if we even need to put this in here. Because I'm not clear, is the coverage of an accessory building regulating the ADU? Or is it regulating a shed that the ADU then puts up after it exists?
So,
Is it regulated?
Because that's also.
It's regulated detached ADUs.
so let's say you have a 3,500 square foot lot. You have the 10% coverage accessory. So that means you could do a ADU with a footprint of 350 feet. That could be 2 stories. You could have 700 2-story ADU with that the accessory building is really talking about the footprint of the building, right?
Coverage is footprint.
Right.
Yes.
So if we had a 10%, the ADU could be more than 10% of the lot, then it would be, if we have a 3,500 minimum, that way you could have that way, if you had the minimum size lot, the ADU could only be 350 square feet.
Or at the 500, we have 5,000 square feet right now. We're saying the lot has to be 5,000 square feet to have an ADU. So what we're saying is if we say 10%, then we're
Wait,
saying.
no, it's actually 3,500, you changed it.
Math is too hard.
So yes.
Let's assume it's 5,000, just for the math.
Because it's easier to divide, Brian?
Yeah, correct. Okay, we can do
You're honest.
we can do the 3,500. Okay, you're right. Yeah, it's 350 square feet.
Yeah.
But like, yes.
So,
But it can go up,
But you can
to
go
Council's
up.
point, it's still
Right.
yours.
Incentivizing
but
the thing you
then-
don't want
But
to
if you
do.
have, if you have a, yeah, I mean, I guess so.
The footprint's only 350, but it goes up.
right, so but like then you think the principal structure
I
would
think it should
be,
say or existing. Because what happens if it's an existing garage?
They're gonna go up and then you're gonna have that weird.
But that's more than 350.
Can't be more than 900.
It's the footprint, not the total square footage.
Well, the other dynamic is you're supposed to treat at minimum the ADU the way you treat the principal dwelling. So if you're allowing the principal dwelling to be at 30% coverage, but you're only allowing the ADU to be 10, you're treating those.
So you can only have a maximum 900 though. So it doesn't matter.
yeah, so.
At the end of the day, the math's still gonna be no more than 900
No, I
square feet.
agree.
So are you saying don't have it in there at all?
But we just came up with an example of when it would be less than 900.
Well, it can't be less than 900. It doesn't have to be 900. It can't be maximum than 900.
It can be.
You can build a
Greater than
500
that.
square foot, I mean, it's greater. You can build a 500 square foot ADU.
But what I'm saying is you need to treat the principal structure, the single family home, the same way you do the ADU. Where,
But you're not, Ryan, because it's only 900 square feet. You're not treating the house as
no,
900.
but they count that into the law. Like, which is why you have the.
Can I just ask for clarification about what we're? It takes a lot for me to lose the thread, and I have lost the thread.
We're looking at the coverage, it's how big the footprint of the.
No, I
ADU
understand that, but
is.
what's the concern? Like, what is the scenario we are trying to address?
So right now it's at 10%. If you have a 3,500, because now I learned, if you have a 3,500 square foot parcel,
I got it.
if it's 10%, the max square footage your
I got
ADU
that.
can be is
Yep, I got
350 feet. But what the same structure, a single family home on that, would
I
be
understand
allowed
that.
to be 30%.
So what is, I understand what it says, but what is it that you want to be able to build
1,050,
rented
right, something like that.
ADUs?
Yeah, correct. Well, you're good at that.
Which would be hard because.
You're really good at that. He was spot on.
Yep, I got
It
it.
would be hard between,
But you wouldn't because it caps out at 900 square feet, but.
Yeah. No, but that,
So,
it's when you're treating
I
a
just-
single family.
So is your point just that you want to be able to build them with a larger square foot on the lot?
I think we're required to by the law because we have to treat single family homes which are allowed to cover 30%.
I got it. Your point is just that they need to be treated equitably with single-family homes under.
I don't want our zoning to get endowed, because then we have nothing.
There'll be a long list of-
But if it's taking up, then we're using 60% of the lot.
I think we're supposed to treat them a single-family accessory structure.
Yeah.
This is an accessory structure, it's not a whole nother single family.
Yeah,
We're supposed to,
It would be 60% as
Right.
council did.
Yeah, then nobody would have the setbacks and open space. I mean,
Yeah.
you'd never be able to, if you allowed them to go ranch style rather than the height in property, everything would be probably,
This is an
Right.
accessory structure that's being
To a
used for an
single-family home.
ADU. Yes, so we are treating it the
treating
same.
it like,
10% we'll be treating it the same.
I mean, for like what we're really trying to do with this, which is have like an in-law or somewhere to put, like, you don't need any more than 900 square feet. And if it's 2 floors, that's perfect. And that's one way to control affordability too, is because they can't build a 4-bedroom house or try to pack people in. I mean, that's all when elderly folks are downsizing, they generally probably 500 square feet, 450 square feet is more than enough. I know it sounds ridiculous, but like when you visualize it and you see that space and how you set it up, that
that's
means
probably
more.
an apartment housing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
my current apartment's only 1,000 square feet.
That's right.
Can I give you an example? So if you have a 3,500 square foot.
It's back on the map again.
You have you confirm. If you have a 3,500 foot, square foot parcel,
Yeah.
Yes,
and you want to put a 900 square foot ADU, which you're allowed to do
yeah.
without going up,
Yeah, so it needs to be at least 15%. If you
it ends up
want
being
to.
25%. If you have a 3,500, that number, 900 square feet of that is 25%,
If you want it to be
To
single.
allow 900, which we're required to do.
which we're
but
required to do.
But they
you're
go,
allowed the
Assuming
900.
houses.
You're not protecting against 3,500 square foot lot. You're protecting against the 13,000 square.
Yeah, but you're capped at 900.
Because if you're,
But that's total gross floor area, not footprint.
yeah, the 900 it's not the coverage, it's the floor.
No, I know, but we're saying this is the coverage of the principal structure. This is the coverage of the lot. It's 10%. I think that it needs to be 30% to treat it the same way as, I'm not gonna die, but like,
We're
that's just.
already all dying.
I mean, at 10%, if you're going with a 3,500 square foot lot size, then that is,
And I want a 900 square foot flat.
okay, so that's only a 700 square foot at 2 stories. You definitely don't want 3-story ADUs. That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
So
this is
if you
the
wanted
coverage.
to at least build the 900 max, you'd have to go to at least like 15%.
Is it deck on an ADU count?
Say what?
Can you put a deck on an ADU? Does that count for the 900?
I don't know, but I'm just saying, if you did 15%,
So we want to say coverage of accessory can be no more
that
than
would be
15%.
525, so that would allow you to build 2-story 900 square foot.
15%.
So have
Yeah.
900.
So Council McDonald proposing 15% for coverage of accessory building.
So I'll move to change accessory dwelling, coverage of accessory building from 10 to 15%.
All right. So, and
Okay.
then,
I'll second that.
so seconded by Councilor Linehan. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I think we've gotten through that. Did anybody, you want on the maximum
No, you
height?
do the height.
So I move to amend it by striking no more than 30 feet and inserting or existing height measured by the highest point of the principal dwelling.
So, all right,
no,
Okay.
It's specific.
He said no.
Specific trumps general. This is specific.
Our zoning is specific.
No, but we're creating a oh yeah.
Why'd you say no?
So if you have a cupola in your house, is that the highest point?
Leftovers.
No, we have a definition of height.
Cupola.
Oh, I didn't know that. When did that height? I don't
So it
think
should
she's
just
saying
be
that.
no more than 30 feet, is that?
Existing height of principal dwelling.
People putting flagpoles on top of their house.
Windmills.
It's an observation.
Honest point.
So what would your suggestion, Nelson, to be for the
Just
lady?
use the term height. It's well defined in our zoning.
Okay.
How we judge everything else, we should judge this.
So maximum height, so we wouldn't say 2.5 stories, what would be?
It's the median average of the height of the roof.
Median average of the height of the.
So
But height's already defined, we don't need to write that in.
we don't need to
What he's
define
saying.
that.
It's
Just
defined
use the
as
term height.
Height.
So maximum height is a median. So
It depends on how your
the
roof
height
is
of
framed. So if you
the
have
principal
a
structure.
triangle, it's halfway up. In a flat roof, it's at the flat roof.
So the maximum height, we would just say, would we say 2.5 stories?
Are you trying to say you would give them the same height as the principal structure?
Correct. Well, so like what I'm saying is if you have a house, because I'm trying to do this for all of them, if you want to extend a wall along your side, you should be able to do it where the wall is. If you want to extend it along the rear, you should do it where the wall is. If you want to extend your roof, you should be able to extend your roof. But if you have a flat roof or different roofs or different height roofs, you might not be able to extend your roof. You might have to do strange things, like
Strange
dormers,
things.
like dormers, like.
Well, you have to do it anyway.
But the reason why people do dormers is because they don't want to affect this height thing.
And it
Right.
wasn't even.
So
Well,
when you
it's also
say,
cheaper than ripping it.
would it be, say, if it's an attached, it would be the height of the principal structure? Be the maximum, is that what we're trying
But
to
that,
say?
what about the garage situation, looking at somebody's yard?
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you on that one.
But, I mean, that could be the same thing with a third floor unit.
Is
You're
Like, if
in the
you're
same
at
footprint,
it.
though. I mean, that's a-
Isn't just what we're trying to say is that we don't want the height higher than, just the height of the existing structure.
But the way that you think of the height of the existing structure is not the way it's defined in the ordinances. The way height is defined is it's the mean.
But you're adding on to the existing structure, and you just say you can't make it any higher than the existing structure, then it's not gonna get any higher.
It's measured the same way, so that he'll measure the ADU the same way, so it ends up to being.
That's if it's an addition. Why aren't you coming up with separate ones for detached?
Well, if not, no, yeah, it's the addition.
Well, I think it
Right, so let's say you have like most of our houses are like this, like you said.
Council,
Yeah, we
Amanda,
passed
Amanda, living in past.
Just for the site plan.
I'm getting lost.
So-
You amended it.
Nobody knows what they are.
So let's say you have a house that's like this, and you want to extend it back, but you have a flat roof. You're no longer, if you're doing the mean of the gable and the flat roof, it's gonna be lower than where your existing gable is, right? You know what I'm saying? If you have a house like this,
Your ridge could end up higher than the flat roof, but.
but not up to the same height as the ridge.
But it's not gonna be like adding on another story. It's not gonna be like, I mean, I'm sure that's
It
something.
would never get
that
higher
you
than
would
the
get.
ridge. It does get higher if you have a flagpole. I didn't think of that. But you get what I'm saying? Like if you have a ridge here, you just want to extend the ridge, but you have a flat roof. The flat roof is bringing down your ridge because it's the median. And so you have to have that strange, do you get what
How
I'm
do you
saying?
have ridges and flat, like with, how many roofs do you have?
Okay.
So, like.
Down this,
Yeah.
like,
Everybody's proposing what they're gonna do to their house.
So is it just the height?
Or their garage.
Should it be just the
Not me either.
height? The height, however, the highest height of the existing structure, is that really what you want to say?
The
Keep
highest,
in mind, this is more than just singles. This could apply to twos, threes, multifamilies, commercials with residential. So it could be a different building.
the highest level height. I'm like, I don't want to do the.
Can you add, scenario, can you add it on you could add the ADU with the top of the highest roof, right?
Can it be
You
the
got a
highest
three-story
ridge?
building, you can put the ADU on that building, right? Top,
Oh, 100%.
technically.
Why don't you have the stories and kind of two different things? Right? So one doesn't necessarily regulate the other. Why don't you have the stories in height be the same as the principal structure's use, because our dimensional controls are by use. So if you are adding on to a 3-family, and that 3-family is now not conforming right now, it's taller than it's supposed to be, the addition to it would be limited to what's allowed by our zoning for a 3-family. If it's a single family, and that single family right now happens to be that house you're talking about, the flat roof, and it's taller than a single family is supposed to be, the addition will be limited to what a current single family house is allowed in stories in height.
It's a good idea.
So then you're holding, it could be, or it could be the same height.
Set the standard for single across the board. I don't know that we should start. I think that's the concern with saying existing height. You don't all of a sudden want to allow 3 stories.
But what
I
I,
want to hold, the standard is single families, right?
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is we're, the same way we're trying to give people the benefit of their existing nonconformity on side and rear, I'm trying to give people the benefit of the existing nonconformity. So how would I word it to give them the benefit of the existing nonconformity?
I think I would recommend you leave the standards. This was my original idea, as we discussed, leave the standards. And it's elsewhere in here that the site plan review looks through the criteria and determines what's reasonable. So they look at it and say, oh, that's already a 3-story building. So it's reasonable that the addition is half a story, 2 stories, or, I mean, I think that's where there was supposed to be some application of these regulations. This is just the guidelines, the basic criteria. I think we're going to get into some situations we can't even imagine if we start saying existing height.
As long as for the record, the legislative intent of this is that the site plan review committee is going to make reasonable findings that for things that don't meet perfectly to these, I'm okay with that.
So are we going to just stick with the 2.5 stories then? Is that?
Yeah, but I would strike, but no more than 30 feet.
Just say 2.5 stories, but then there's not really, the stories aren't defined. But then it's just reasonable as to what the site plan review interprets the site plan.
Carolina HR asks why the mental.
All right, so, okay.
But you're gonna get rid of or existing height measured by principle, right?
Yeah, we get rid of that too.
So
I move to
code
strike.
amendment, okay, go ahead.
I move to strike, but no more than 30 feet.
So it would be, end up just being, the maximum height would be 2.5 stories.
Okay, I'll second that.
So, all right, so motion by Councilor Brown, second by Councilor Linehan. Let's see. So, all those in favor say aye. All right, any opposed? No, all right, so that recommendation goes forward.
On page 2, we have the site plan review process.
Right,
Now that it's bifurcated between detached and attached, I move to add the word detached before accessory dwelling units on the line that says section 1232 030D site plan review for detached accessory dwelling units, and then add detached in the first line, strike ADU. Add the sentence at the end of the first sentence, attached accessory dwelling units are not required to go through the site plan review process and are allowed to.
okay.
That'd be my first one.
Do you want to include so-called in there as well? So one paragraph.
Yeah, you can strike so-called, you're right.
So any questions about that?
And this is to make it reflect the change that we already proposed.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Under
Okay.
applicability, add the word detached under A before accessory dwelling unit, detached.
You know, what are we looking at?
Sorry, so
2A.
2A, all right, so,
yep, applicability.
okay.
So we're adding detached to any detached accessory dwelling unit.
Good next number, I have a question. What's detached by definition?
Detached is separate from the principal structure.
Did you put a breezeway?
breezeway is no longer detached. I believe that's it.
So, Ryan, if I don't want to go to site plan review, not that I'm against what I'm saying, I put a breezeway, it's connected, I don't have to go to site plan review. So I'm not against what you're saying.
What's a breezeway?
A covered walkway.
Oh, is that true?
And again, I'm just saying, there's a way around that then. I'll put a 6-foot breezeway, connect it, and I don't have to go to site plan review, it's going to do well.
Breezeway connects 2 or more buildings, but hold on, there's something else.
The reason why I know that, I think it happened down the Cape, it's a little screwed up. Because the neighbor just put a breezeway in and have to do a bunch of things.
I mean, maybe we could put out ordinance that,
Well, I'm just saying, either, yes.
I think we addressed that.
I'm just saying, I agree, that's what I'm trying to say, I think that's the.
The addition of a breezeway,
So right now, right, if it's in the house, doesn't have to go to site plan review, right?
Yeah.
New addition does. Right? If I connect it, it's not detached anymore, I don't go to site plan review.
yeah, no, that's a good one.
Well, maybe that's something that maybe can be worked
Yeah,
on
I
a
think,
little bit.
so I
we
want to
got
address
time
it.
to
So let's
develop.
address planning that. So,
Right.
but applicability, so it would be to add detached, and it would be to add a third section C, subsection C, attached special dwelling units are not required, and that's kind of redundant, but like, there's both purpose and intent and applicability, so I mean, maybe that's redundant, and it doesn't need to be so.
I would suggest when Nelson comes back, we ask him and ask Ally as well, given there's been some confusion and it's not 100% clear who will be doing these reviews, we should put in there that the building commissioner is authorized to do
To make
the
reasonable
site,
findings.
to essentially do the site plan review. I mean, he's gonna conduct the site plan review as opposed to the committee. But I think maybe we need to put something in there so that it's clear who
Attached or-
we're designating to do this, if they're not required to go for site plan review to the committee. Is it Nelson or his designee or what? Because there was some confusion with that last case.
For site plan review.
There is
or
some
attached
case law that
units.
says the building commissioner may be authorized to do it, but, you know,
But we don't have second review. But for the.
Right,
To make the decision.
right, to review these.
About whether
You're not
it's
having-
reasonable.
Yeah, you're not having anybody look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So you can show it now.
Are you okay with the amendments that I just suggested for the applicability?
Tabling the breeze like this.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because that
I think
changes.
we have to make
Yeah,
sure we
yeah.
have that to breezeway for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. So then that's, we have changes in applicability number 2.
All right, so we got to vote on that, those changes that.
Yep.
I'm sorry, how far down did you go? Did we say we were gonna hold item C until Nelson gets back?
No, so including item C, but the breezeway discussion is going to get held.
So now we're voting to adopt.
So we're making an amendment to A, B, and C, everything that you've got in red?
Correct.
Okay, and that was seconded by Council Linehan?
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right.
And Carol, I can get you tomorrow.
That's all right.
You wanna know?
I'm a no.
And then I think for 3, the scope.
Sounds like that makes
Site
sense.
plan review.
That did make sense,
Yep.
we're skipping over that.
So you just.
Um,
The question here is about the variance. What, can you explain again why, number 4 general, why we
So
said no
we're not
variance?
making any
is
changes
allowed?
to number 3, we're
No,
scrapping
no
his suggestions?
changes, no change, yeah, no changes.
You convinced me on number 3. I agree.
All right.
So number 4,
But I can't understand why we don't allow variances. People want to.
Okay.
So you would want to allow somebody to go for a variance and say, I don't need to go for site plan review? Or I don't need to do any of these requirements,
Well, can't,
require a variance of anything. These aren't use regulated, so it's just in general, would you set these as, would you establish the regs?
well,
You want people to adhere to them. In this case, site plan review committee should be able to. At least it's not.
okay, so then maybe it makes sense.
Yeah.
Plus, we're not, you know, you can't require that.
So could they, wait, if they wanted to, could they?
Right.
That's what, for,
I don't know if you want them to, I guess that's the point.
I'm not gonna throw that at you, you're not gonna change.
So you withdrawn any changes?
yeah, because I'm not exactly sure what it does, and I think pursuant to it doesn't make sense. But there's this thing about the occupancy limit that we still need to figure out. So any accessory dwelling unit
Plan.
amended by insert plans shall conform with the building, fire, and sanitary codes, and written proof of compliance shall be provided prior to the issuance of building permit? This, we're on.
That's all state. You don't need.
We're gonna strike the whole section.
Well, again, the intent of that was to require people to find out if they could physically build their ADU before going through a site plan review process.
Should we just say at the time of applying for a building permit? That's really what you're doing, right?
Yeah. That makes sense. At the time of applying for a building permit. Because that would trigger both site plan review and people who don't need to go to site plan review.
That just.
The more we talk about it, the less I think it matters. It could just be an internal, just like we guide everybody else in the world through this process or that process. It could be the same thing with this, where someone says, I want to put an ADU, we could say to them, okay, give us full-blown plans, building, plumbing, electrical, fire, sanitation, you know?
And I mean, isn't that usually they apply for building permit and you may reject it, and that's usually how it, or you would say, I can't give you.
Like if Michelle applies for her house and she just puts drawings, she
I'm the
submits
only one that's not applying.
and she submits it for drawing.
And Maria.
Crappy
Else
drawing,
to find
and
a Melrose.
a napkin.
So the examples are, there's different examples, and it depends on the process. Someone's gonna build the deck, that's gonna violate a setback, they give us a full set of plans, we deny it, get them into a process with one of those. Malden Hospital's coming in, they didn't give us a full-blown set of construction drawings to go for get a special permit, right, because of what they don't get. So they give us floor plans, elevations, site plan. They go off, do their thing, if they get the special permit, then they give us a full set of plans. We want to make this the previous one, where people are giving us their entire set of plans, so that I can look at it and go, no, you cannot comply with the code, change your plan and come back.
You know, like the
Before they go-
basement's a crawl space or something, so why should they go through site plan review?
Yeah.
For
Or an
a
attic,
crawl space.
an attic where they don't have ceiling height, they don't have, emergency escape, whatever. So we don't want them to go to a site plan review process, get approved, be all excited, and then get denied. So, sorry.
But they could dig down their basement. There's ways that they could
There's
address.
many ways to do it, but they have to give us a set of plans
Well,
showing.
that's expensive.
But they show us that before they do it. We don't just ensure compliance on the inspection, we ensure compliance actually permit issuance, so that you don't.
So they don't get an attorney and hire somebody and figure out, this is not gonna be a $30,000 job, it's gonna be a $100,000 job. It isn't worth it for me at this point.
Yeah.
Where, that's why I think they try to save it.
So it's a long way to get to. I think we can just make that our internal process, because we don't need this to govern the building code, fire.
Nelson, I want clarification before you leave.
Well, can we just?
I want to talk about the breezeway.
No, yeah, but can I, so I just move to strike this entire paragraph.
So we're not even gonna have the discussion about building, fire, and sanitary codes, because that just
I think it's,
happens already. So we don't need that included in the,
We can require people to do that. We don't need the ordinance.
not necessary. So we just, so that's the motion to strike
and then,
with paragraph.
I'm gonna vote for it with that.
So we've got these two paths,
Within
right?
the vote.
Detached, attached.
Hang on. we don't
My
have to
question
strike it
is,
it
if I
doesn't
build
mean
a
it.
detached, I have to go to site plan review. If I don't build a detached, I go automatically septic, right? If I build a detached
That's in the.
and add a breezeway,
But
so
did
it
you-
connects to my
did you-
existing house.
As breezeway went,
Oh,
And this is existing.
after you've already built the ADU and got it.
No, I'm coming to you, when I add the ADU, I'm gonna put a breezeway so it's connecting to the existing house.
yeah, all right, I need review on what we got
I
this.
believe our zoning addresses buildings connected with breezeways as being one structure.
Being one structure,
Yeah.
so it doesn't have to go to site plan
You
review.
get that section?
It would make it attached.
Well, it's saying the breezeway the permits to connect two or more buildings, but I thought there was a section.
There's no
that
such,
said
there's a section that states.
the breezeway, but I couldn't
two-
find it.
Two
Right, but
buildings
there's
on the
still
same
building
parcel
codes,
connect.
right?
Breezeway, consider-
Well, we haven't.
Yeah. I couldn't find it.
You're right, though, people will do that.
Of course they're gonna do that.
Well, because you don't even need a breezeway to be more than just like
Yeah, there's
a
no-
tiny, like.
What I'm saying is, I don't want them to try, if we've agreed, external ADUs will go through site plan review.
Well, the breezeway's not the ADU, right?
No, but will it make it part of the existing structure if I build it? Both?
It's connected.
It's connecting it.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think we gotta write something that says if this can't be connected by a breezeway or.
You're talking about an existing garage, connecting it to avoid having to go through site plan review.
Yes.
If you're just gonna add on, just add an addition, you don't need the breezeway. You could just add an addition
Correct.
on.
But if you connect the garage. you
Right,
go to site plan
that's
review.
the question.
But then, wouldn't the building code, when you renovate the garage, like, wouldn't the breezeway take up too much space? And then are there setbacks
Could.
for your weird tunnel? Can we just have, can we force them to do underground tunnel?
Tunnels are underneath, breezeways are above.
I feel like you can build a tunnel.
I can build it. I actually might have a tunnel now.
We have been high school connecting a couple of our buildings.
I think
in order
this
to
one's gonna be-
The class, you had to go through this
Gotta be
weird.
discussed.
The other question was, should we, I'm sorry, Steve, you wanted to just ask Nelson that other question, or designating him as the person to review these?
So I guess the question Michelle had is kind of the thing of, we have things that are not going automatically site plan review. So what about the attached units that are not going site plan review? Does that,
So we have to
you're
put in the
you-
ordinance that you're authorized to do
You're
it?
authorized to.
No, according to Trump's state law.
Well,
So-
State's law, so
State's
should we
law.
put it in? Who we want to be doing this?
That's what got decided at the Board of Appeals. If we don't have a process for it to go through, then yeah, it's making.
So I think we need to put it in.
I think we should put it in.
But yeah,
I would just, could we make it you or your designee? Because I can imagine a situation in which you get so many ADU permits that you actually just like bring on a consultant to just review these.
A consultant, like an outside company?
No, I mean, like, you brought on somebody part-time whose job is just reviewing ADU.
Well,
Like, if you get
My
overwhelmed,
two building inspectors make zoning determinations all the time.
well, I'm just saying,
That are
like,
made under my.
does it have to be you? Okay.
Who are you then?
But does it have to, if it implies that it has to be you,
But I think he has a different level of liability to the state, right?
I
And
think,
So-
I think it has to be me, but that's not to say that one of those guys can't do it, say.
they would like
Can
give
you
you
review
recommendation, you
It's like
sign
we do
on.
now, like,
Is that how it
there's
goes?
things that only I can issue like occupancies.
Okay,
I don't issue occupancies, they do, I sign.
I got it. Okay, well, that's fine then. I'm just trying to, like, not,
Where's the other breezeway?
I don't.
but are you gonna apply the criteria?
I
Are
wanna move on.
you gonna apply these
I have
criteria?
no idea. Yeah, yes.
all right. So we are
We'll see how busy Ally is.
on Ryan proposed the general changes. So A is staying the same, or are you're proposing to eliminate paragraph B? There shall be no variance, or did we say
No, we can leave that.
B will stay, and then
Understand.
C is is suggesting we eliminate what's C, right?
Short-term rental is prohibited.
Short-term rentals. So
That's
we're
just my
we're
statement.
striking that.
What do you want to?
No, wait, that's fine. You don't have to touch that one.
Okay, so we don't have to, so C is.
No, I was just saying pursuant whatever law, but it doesn't make sense. It's fine.
So C is staying there, that the short-term rental of ADU is prohibited, so that's C is staying. So D is being.
I'm sorry, are we striking, we're striking the original B?
No,
No, D is
B,
staying,
B.
so A, B, and C are staying, you just want to strike D.
yeah, the only thing that's being struck is the paragraph that says any accessory dwelling unit
Right.
and ends in red site plan review process.
Right,
So
so
you're
that's
gonna
we're
look
striking
D.
D,
D,
Uh,
so this
The other
direct,
side,
all
yeah.
Councilor Mallon is strike D. Because that happens anyway in the process, so whenever that happens.
Yes.
So, any second for that, all right?
Monday.
and then
Councilor
what
Cohen.
about, yeah, what,
I think it's only fair.
what about,
Well, I just think
what about
Councilor
the-
Kennedy. Okay, so this is, we're right here. which is striking
Brian.
this right here.
Excuse me. The new section C and D, are we striking those?
No, we're not amending, we're not adding. So,
No, because those are existing, but I didn't know what they meant, so I just bolded them for the spectrum.
So those will remain to be the original E and F.
Yeah, those are exactly.
so we're striking
C
D.
and D as E and F.
We're striking D?
If the
The
establishment of
original.
an accessory dwelling
The
unit
original.
violation of dimensional controls.
Good. So it's,
Is that what
it's,
we're
it's
striking?
any accessory dwelling that shall
Yeah.
conform to the building.
I got it, yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay,
So
I'll
that's-
second
The
that.
original D.
Second by Council Linehan. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. So that section, paragraph.
Under design standards, A, to strike single-family residential.
So we are now on,
Oh,
so
fine.
we're on page 5, right, page 3. So this is the top of page 3.
Wait,
So-
sorry, just one question. Did we have a question earlier about having your having inspections of the unit before we issue? Or at the time of application?
Before the,
We should
it would
raise-
be before the permits are.
Is that something we need to bring up in zoning, or is that something you would just
So we
do?
can do that.
You just do it?
No, it's 25.
And we're not doing anything right
No, I
now
tried to
on
get
this
the
question
survey.
about whether it requires variance, that's existing code.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just leaving it. All right.
B, yep.
So we're on to 75 design standards. So at the top of page 3, just changing the terminology and striking.
That's what I'm saying.
So we're striking out an A, striking out single-family residential and just saying,
Caps.
it just says dwelling unit. That was what you.
We do this whole section as one motion. to do
Yeah.
it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I looking at, so C, dimensional controls, I'm just looking at what 12, 16, 10 even means.
That is the section for accessory dwelling units.
Right.
That says sheds can be closer to the property line
So we're just replacing it.
Accessory structures.
for accessory structures, right?
Yeah, so what would be the impact if we did allow this to?
It would contradict the dimensional controls we spent 2 hours talking about.
Okay, so yeah, then never mind. I don't want to change this.
So you're not changing C.
No, not.
We were gonna let you.
No, I just,
Thank you.
part of me suggesting this is to understand what they even mean. Okay, so,
Bless you.
yeah, and so the question I have for D is this. Any expansion of the building's footprints or additions to an existing principal dwelling for an accessory unit, it previously read, shall comply with all dimensional controls.
Lost it to me.
Like, but doesn't that mean that you're now taking a pre-existing non-conforming structure and making it now comply with all dimensional controls?
The expansion, the expansion.
Expansion.
But we just made the changes under the table of
Changed all
intent.
that.
So I think it should say may comply, but not shall. I also don't even know if this is necessary, maybe just regulate something. Like, I'm not trying to prohibit, they can comply if they want to.
I think where you've already specifically addressed existing buildings versus accessory buildings, that this probably doesn't apply. Right, Michelle? Don't you
So
think?
we're just striking.
I think this was possibly from, when we were going there. No, I think this is what we talked about.
No, I think it did apply. I think that
To-
was. No,
Because now we are allowing different dimensional, we're allowing the non-conformities to be extended.
Oh, because you put the or lesser,
because they
oh,
already
so that's different, yeah.
overrode this, so that can go.
Yeah.
So I would move to strike D in its entirety. And then I would move to amend E size by striking the smallest existing dwelling unit in and inserting gross floor area of. And then striking greater and inserting smaller. So it will read the maximum size of the accessory dwelling unit is 900 square feet or half the size of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is smaller. Smaller.
So we're adding a sentence to A, striking C and D, and making the adjustment you just described to E.
No, so yeah, so adding, no, striking single family residential from A, not touching B, C, striking D, and then D.
All right. Everybody understand that? Got a second for that?
Yeah, I'll second
Second
that.
by Council Linehan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we,
No, hold on, oh yeah, no, that's fine.
all right.
Oh, do we want to put this thing about the site plan review not being more than 90 days from when it opens? So that people look at second purgatory?
I think that hurts them, Brian, I'm telling you.
Because sometimes it's gonna be, usually it's.
I mean, I guess we can always amend it if we need to.
Yeah,
That's true.
and if they have to extend it, you gotta make them come in to extend it. It's like,
But
it's,
whoever the site plan review ends up being, like, we should try not to put them into a purgatory.
Well, it's incumbent upon the city to be like that with any process we put. If we're dragging our feet on people, they have the right to follow us to the carpet. There's lots of processes that we could give people to run around on that we don't because it's not the right thing to do, right? It's our job to get it done.
Usually,
Just
just if I could, go back to submission requirements, do you want anybody applying for an ADU to submit this info? Do you want Nelson to have this info
Where are you?
on submission requirements? This is only, you're only gonna get this info if you go for site plan review, now that you, you're gonna be recommending that it
Wait,
not
so
be
then-
applicable.
So no, so.
You don't want all this info submitted for any
You were
ADU?
recommending it says all applications for a building permit?
No, for an ADU, for an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, well, yeah, for a building. Would it just make sense for just say building permit though, or?
Maybe it's permit applications or something. I mean, I would think you still want this.
Because you need to
information.
get to site plan review, you have to file a building permit, correct?
Yes.
So I would just say for all applications for building permits.
but I don't think you need all this for a building permit. You don't. Right.
No, but this only applies to
It-
This only applies to AUs, this isn't the AU section, right?
Yeah, but what I think what Michelle is saying is, how do you require this to get to Nelson, this information?
No, everything, it does require a building permit.
No, but, time out. So section 7 says all applicants for site plan review. So we're only talking about the ones going to site plan review.
What about the other?
Shall be in
what's
writing
the
and
other
provide the
ones?
following. So you got this
Oh, I
long
get what you're
list
saying.
Yeah.
of things.
Oh, yeah, so
Some-
you're right, this should just be for site plan review.
Some of those are, we would have when they apply for building permit. Some of them we wouldn't.
Oh, okay, that, yeah, that makes sense.
But you wouldn't want the name of the applicant for the ones that don't go through site plan review?
Well,
You're gonna want a lot of the same information, right?
You're gonna want some of this
Well, you
information,
will have-
those that don't go, it's like.
No, it's just no, it's just a building permit, like you're adding an addition.
I mean, there's already, for a building permit application that has.
It's a three, you don't want to have them submit documents regarding section 3, 48.3. I don't know, I thought you would want this for ADUs, but
Where are you saying this? Where?
What page are you on?
look on page 4B, it's all compressed in this, but it's
For,
after 19, it's on the wrong line here.
oh, yeah, B's on the wrong line. Information requested, new address, well, but this has to happen with the building permit.
I mean, some of it does. Again, this is just going back to that whole other issue we saw where it's not really clear what you would be looking at.
So we can't add stuff to the building permit application. That's state law. What the building permit application is what it is. So some of this stuff is on there,
So this only
but
applies
not
to
all this
something-
stuff is on there. So if you want something outside of what we asked for a building permit, we'd have to have that. So that's what needs to be the list.
As a site plan review.
Those- Well,
The
unless
application
you
packet.
also,
Application package.
For any-
Site plan review is a panel.
For any
Whether it's
ADU.
attached or detached.
For any accessory dwelling unit is what I'm suggesting you consider.
Brian, let's put it this way. All the information that you require, one path is it goes right to Nelson.
Yeah.
The other path is it goes to the site plan review.
Yeah.
What's the difference if they produce both sides? I don't understand what the difference is.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Right? I mean, I think it's,
Yeah.
now some of the stuff might not be needed, depending what it is.
It's hard not knowing what you require.
I know, but that's why I think you have a checklist. You said this is all everything's required and you gotta work with Nelson.
I'm not sure this needs to be in the ordinance. I mean,
Right.
this could just be like we have a a checklist for, if you go to the planning board, I mean, there's not.
Yeah, that's something you gotta choose.
I agree.
Yeah,
So should we just, should we,
Can't we just make a checklist that says this is what you need to give us?
Yeah, I personally, yeah, I agree.
I mean, should it just say provide the,
I mean, it's, I think it's
provide the
gotta be
information
someplace.
required by the building inspector?
Yeah. I
For
mean, like
ADUs.
planning board, it's in their rules and regs that so somebody would have to, I'd say it has to be in writing someplace to require it. If you don't want to put it in the ordinance, I understand that, maybe it goes into the building,
Well, I mean, maybe,
chapter 4, instead.
maybe just, for some of Carrie's concerns regarding awareness, maybe we create an ISD policy sort of thing that covers process.
I think that
And then-
would be great.
And then provides, here's what you need to give us. It's to make our life easier too, because instead of
Yeah.
answering 20,000 questions.
And then,
Should
and then post
this
it on the
just
website.
give you the authority to do that, Nelson? Just say that all applications for site, or all applications for ADUs shall be in writing and provide the information required by the building inspector.
Maybe it,
Well, if it's a commercial
should you say like,
But not residential.
or something?
If they just say, we have a right,
It could be
A separate checklist or something?
but like for residential, we have a
Somebody
right
not be
sufficient.
applicable, yeah.
Yeah,
I think he can just do that.
just do it, yeah.
Especially if we're gonna make at some point these outreach.
Yeah, I think we can make a checklist without having it memorialized through
Okay.
the ordinance.
So would you like me to strike section 7 in its entirety?
I was second that.
So I move to strike, section 7 in its entirety.
So,
I am thinking that, like, would it be helpful for site plan review, would it be helpful to just say the building commissioner will set the requirements and just say that? Because
Or should we leave it just for site plan review?
No, that's what I was
And you
saying,
can,
see the
you can
tag.
mimic it for the other one.
I mean, I think you have to set something in writing, and again, it could be Nelson, it could be somebody else that says, hey, I just need the guy's name and address, so I think we want to, be forward thinking, and if it's not in zoning, I understand it's hard to change. Maybe it can just go in the building section, like, you have all your permits and the permit fees. Maybe there can be a section, or city council has site plan review fees, you could just have a separate section of the ordinance cover it, not chapter 12. But I think it should be
Well,
someplace.
Now you say it like that, it might be something we want to create in our ISD, let's say, website, that addresses our different types of Dover member uses. So we have one for ADUs, and then we have one for all others, and they could mirror each other as far as, the types of information, but how the processes are different. So, yeah.
Do you want to say,
That's a short answer, yeah.
refer to the building department for an application? Like submission requirement?
Yeah, inspectional services.
Yes.
submission requirements shall be set by the inspectional services.
Yeah, so submission requirements, all applicants shall submit an application as required by inspection
Inspectional
services.
services department.
Great.
Okay, so that would be to strike everything and just add all applications for an accessory dwelling unit shall submit an application as required by inspectional services.
all right. People understand that? Seconded by Councilor Taylor. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right, so that amendment is made, and then just we want to do the one on the hearing time or what?
Nelson, building, being authorized.
So it's hearing that
Well, I mean, you have site plan review committee for accessory dwelling units. I think it should be who's reviewing the others, and what criteria. If you want him to apply criteria. You're gonna separate it. I just don't think it should be left open.
Would
We
it
don't
be-
know
would it
who's gonna apply and who might not apply.
Would it be under general, any accessory dwelling unit shall comply to all requirements and comply with all regulations of this ordinance as determined by the building? By inspection services,
Oh, yeah, I got it.
Where is it?
general A, or general A.
You can put by the site plan review committee or the building commissioner as required by section blah, 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 blah. Wherever you're putting.
Well, I get it.
I got a bad news.
Hey, that's almost as dramatic as the building.
I got a bad I can get up, really. We're all getting.
Tony's mine.
Well,
Simonelli
no,
drew it.
you
No,
would
it's
do
Simonelli.
site plan review and
Yeah,
look
he
at
drew it on this
the
criteria
criteria
or-
or.
We don't have site plan review.
Don't forget that meeting.
If I have to look at it, we
But
wouldn't
you
call
know
it
the
site
whole,
plan
you know
review.
that whole other case.
Yeah,
The,
but
the criteria were in the state law, but nobody was authorized to apply it, so they said it defaulted to you.
right, but it's my responsibility to review it under the same criteria. The criteria isn't changed, the person changes. So,
Right, so do you
so
think
I would
that should
say
be
that
in
all
here?
of these will be reviewed by either site plan review or the building commissioner in accordance with section 12.12.030. So that'd be under, that's where you broke it up and attached and some use regulations which designate site plan review versus yeses. So if it's a site plan review, it's a site plan review. If it's a yes, it's going to be. And that's consistent with how our educational, religious, daycare uses are going to look within the use code.
Okay, so doesn't go under site plan review. Where, do we need a new section, Michelle?
Well, this is 12, this one is gonna be site plan review for detached accessory dwelling units. So it would be review for attached accessory dwelling units? That what
I
you're-
was covering both with one sentence, but I guess you could.
where's, but he's saying, where does the sentence go?
Oh, and
At the
that's,
beginning, under the, where were you starting at? You were under the,
well, so.
General?
our
General.
no, but the general is underneath a site plan review process. And
Yeah.
actually, now that I think about it, everything is under the site plan review process.
Well, for this, the subsection D is, and then E is the special permit, right?
Yeah, I know, but all the changes we need about gross floor area,
yeah, but section 12.030 isn't under,
no,
that's our use regulations.
you're right.
So you don't need to state that accessory dwelling unit, a government use, which has an allowance of yes, needs to be reviewed by somebody. That's what we just went through, right? It's subject to reasonable regulations, and if it doesn't have a body to go to, like site plan review, it defaults to.
How do we get back to the first page?
It's no different.
Our
But you think
our
that's just
educational
case,
uses.
you think that's case law, or that should be written into the law?
A little bit.
If that's what we want you to
I
do.
think we
This
found
is important, thank you.
So,
Should we put it in here in the ordinance?
Yeah, I think if you want it to be done, I think you should. put it.
I think so.
put an asterisk in the table on the, next to the yeses that say to be subject to reasonable regulations reviewed by the building commissioner.
Yeah.
And we can do the same, we have the same asterisk with the educational, same asterisk with the religious, the same asterisk with the daycares.
Well, you're just gonna be doing the scope of review for these, the regulations, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, so the ones that say yes, accessory dwelling unit attached, there'll be an asterisk that says, at the bottom, it says, subject to review for reasonable regulations by the building commissioner.
You're actually two asterisks in on the table of use intensity regulations, so. You're gonna need like,
Subject to
No.
review.
You don't need to, because in reviewing it, I'm referencing those sections. Okay, those are the reasonable regulations.
So we're
just
gonna make that amendment to the table.
To
in
add
section one.
asterisks after every yes in A, B, and C, A, B, C, R, O, B, N, under attached, and to add a corresponding asterisk at the bottom of the table, the use regulations. Subject to
Review
review
under reasonable regulations by the building commissioner.
under reasonable regulation by the building. commissioner?
That's me.
Big DC.
are we also adding
Commissioner.
an asterisk about the function of the site plan review, which we can add for anything else that's site plan?
If you say something.
I would also like to, so if we're doing this for the things that say yes, can we also do this for the things that say site plan review? To just be clear that the site plan review is able to make, I don't remember, I wrote a thing.
You mean for
like-
churches and
You mean
schools?
like Britain?
Yeah, you can do that too, but I
So
mean,
this,
especially if you're the
this
80.
site plan review is gonna go to this 1232 and do all this that you just put in.
Yeah, my concern was not just in the use regulations, but the table of intensity regulations.
Yeah, so you have to do that too there, right?
That was my, I understand it says site plan review and then links to the site plan review section. But it's, can we also add an asterisk or whatever the next thing is, because there's asterisks already.
Does it say site plan review?
No, it doesn't, because it's in a different section, but it does give these dimensional controls.
But the scope of the site plan review under the ordinance basically says with what reasonable regulations concerning the bulk and height structures as well as turning yard size of lot. So it explains what the scope of site plan review for that use is. Someone couldn't, site plan review committee couldn't decide suddenly, they, no, we'll get a variance, do something against the violent state law.
I will draft something, if I can describe it.
And then we can address the breezeway. I think that the intent, so people know, that's what sort of the power impacts there. But our goal is to have a meeting of the ordinance committee after the public hearing to address any of the feedback that you guys have in terms of your recommendations, any change that we need to make, so that we can still get it out to the floor and not miss the February 2nd deadline. Is that still the intent, Councilor?
Yeah, that's the intent, yeah.
So the hearing's Monday night. I don't know what time it's gonna end.
So after we adjourn the hearing portion, so because you have a hearing, I looked this up, the reason why we have to have both hearings is both the city council and the planning board have to have a hearing. The city council has deferred that responsibility to the ordinance committee. So once we do the hearing portion and we adjourn the hearing, we are going to recess this.
The rules of ordinance, right, yeah.
Because we're gonna have your recommendation.
I don't know. We'll have it in writing that night. You'll probably have it the next morning.
But
I
based
don't
on
know
the
how late we're
conversation.
gonna go.
But based on
Yeah,
the
you'll hear the conversation, correct.
So, and if we can make some of those preemptively, rather than doing it on the floor.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were gonna have a meeting that Tuesday night before your regular meeting. And the other thing I had talked to the clerk about was you still have Wednesday and Thursday too, if you need to hold a special meeting, if you don't finish it on Tuesday, or you needed to do, you have time to schedule another meeting.
I think we probably will do both. We probably put placeholders for after the meeting.
After the meeting's tough, because everybody's gonna be tired, in all fairness, I'm not on the committee, but that's a long day.
We could do it before.
I think you do it before.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to because your feedback, I want to make sure that we have.
No, but I'm saying, if you do
Enough time
before, but I think if everybody goes into a good fit, you do it before Tuesday. And if there's still something outstanding, you have the ability to schedule a meeting before that. that's.
Well, you'd still have Wednesday and Thursday. I don't know if you wanna.
But we would want to maybe put a placeholder for a Wednesday and Thursday.
Meeting, you'd have to put it in before.
In
Of the full
Tuesday, you wanna
Yeah.
make sure you're receiving the planning board recommendation.
Correct.
But
So
that's,
looking at like the
part of
30th
your-
or something like that.
What day's the second on? What day's the second on?
Did you do this number 7?
This-
Like, are we done with page, number 7?
Yeah, we decided they're not doing that.
Okay.
We're
So
thinking
we should
Section
probably.
10, we're not doing section
Oh,
10.
we're
page-
doing
yeah,
section
go ahead.
Yeah, no, So we'll try to do it on the 28th, but we should probably have to post a meeting on the 30th, just in case.
I agree.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
we all seconded.
Second.